The ballroom fell silent. 100 pairs of eyes turned toward her. This dusty, travel-worn woman clutching a carpet bag in a room dripping with crystal chandeliers and silk gowns. Someone laughed, then another. The whispers started like wildfire. Is that her? The nerve! Absolutely shameless. Clara's throat tightened. She didn't understand. She was here for seamstress work, nothing more. Then a voice cut through the chaos, deep, commanding, dangerous. That's my wife. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale travels. The stagecoach had dropped Clara at the edge of town 3 hours past sunset, which was her first mistake. The second was trusting the hand-drawn map that Mrs. Hendricks had sent with her employment letter. The third was not turning around the moment she saw the fountain, an actual fountain, with carved angels and water that caught the moonlight like scattered diamonds. Seamstresses didn't work in places with fountains, but Clara was tired, bone-tired. The kind of tired that came from 2 weeks on dusty roads, sleeping in way stations that smelled like old tobacco and desperation, eating hardtack that could break teeth. Her feet ached in boots that had worn through at the heels somewhere in Nebraska. The Wyoming wind cut through her threadbare coat like it had a personal grudge. The estate loomed ahead, all stone and timber, windows blazing with warm light. Music drifted out. A waltz played on what had to be a real piano, not the saloon kind. Laughter and conversation hummed beneath it, the sound of people who'd never worried about their next meal. Clara checked the address on her crumpled letter one more time. Callahan Estate. This was it. She climbed the front steps, carpet bag clutched in both hands. The door was massive, carved with intricate patterns of wheat and cattle, the brass handle polished to a mirror shine. She could see her reflection in it, a ghost of a woman with hollow cheeks and hair coming loose from its pins. She knocked. No answer. The music swelled louder. She knocked again, harder. Nothing. Clara bit her lip. She'd come all this way. She had 17 cents to her name and nowhere else to go. Mrs. Hendricks had been clear in her letter. Arrive on the 20th, come to the main house, and they'd get her settled in the staff quarters before starting work in the morning. The door wasn't latched. It swung open when Clara leaned against it, just a little, just enough to peek inside. The entrance hall stole her breath. Marble floors. A chandelier that must have cost more than her entire life. A grand staircase swept upward, the banister gleaming. And beyond that, through open double doors, the ballroom. That's when Clara saw them. At least 100 people, maybe more. Women in gowns that probably required 3 people to get into, jewels at their throats catching the light. Men in tailored suits, some in formal wear that looked like it came from New York or San Francisco. Servers moved through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and delicate foods Clara couldn't name. This wasn't a staff entrance. This was the main event. Clara stumbled backward, but her heel caught on the doorframe. She lurched forward instead, carpet bag swinging, and suddenly she wasn't in the hallway anymore. She was in the ballroom. The music stopped first, just died, mid-note, the pianist's hands freezing over the keys. Then the conversations dropped away, one by one, like candles being snuffed out. By the time Clara regained her balance, every single person in that room was staring at her. Her cheeks burned. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to Well, well. A woman's voice sharp as cut glass. She actually came. The crowd parted. A woman glided forward, and Clara understood immediately that this was someone who'd never had to ask for anything twice in her life. She was probably 50, with silver-streaked hair piled high and a dress that could have fed a family for a year. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I must say, the woman continued, I didn't think you'd have the audacity to show your face here. But I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Clara's mind raced. Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm here about the seamstress position. Laughter erupted. Not polite chuckles, but genuine, cruel laughter. A younger woman stepped forward, beautiful in a cold, sculpted way. Her dress was ice blue, probably worth more than a good horse. Oh, that's precious, the seamstress position. She looked at the older woman. Is that what they're calling it now, Mrs. Callahan? Mrs. Callahan. Clara's stomach dropped. I received a letter, Clara said, her voice smaller now. She fumbled in her bag, pulled out the worn envelope. From a Mrs. Hendricks offering employment, Mrs. Hendricks manages the household staff. The older Mrs. Callahan's lip curled. She would never invite someone like you to enter through the front door during my son's engagement celebration. Engagement celebration. Clara looked around the room again, seeing it differently now. The flowers, white roses everywhere. The cake on a table in the corner, 3 tiers tall. The couple's portrait hanging above the fireplace. A stern-looking man with dark hair and harder eyes, and the ice-blue woman standing beside Clara. "I didn't know," Clara whispered. "I'm so sorry, You'll just what?" The woman in blue stepped closer. Her perfume was overwhelming, something with jasmine that probably cost more than Clara's entire wardrobe. "Slink away? Disappear into the night? After you've already humiliated yourself and everyone here?" "Vanessa," Mrs. Callahan's voice carried a warning. But Vanessa wasn't done. She circled Clara like a predator. "Look at you, that dress, is that calico? And those boots?" She laughed, a tinkling sound that made Clara's skin crawl. "Did you honestly think you could just walk in here and, what, that Reed would choose you over me?" "I don't know anyone named Reed," Clara said. Her hands shook. She shoved them into her coat pockets to hide it. "I don't know any of you. I came for a job, nothing else." "Of course you did." Vanessa's smile was vicious. "You traveled all the way from, where was it? Some charity house in Philadelphia, all for an honest seamstress position." The crowd murmured. Clara caught fragments. "Philadelphia orphanage. Heard she was writing him letters. Completely inappropriate. I never wrote any letters," Clara said, louder now. Anger was starting to burn through the humiliation. "I answered an advertisement for employment, that's all." "Really?" Mrs. Callahan pulled a folded paper from her sleeve, the gesture so smooth it had to be planned. "Then perhaps you can explain these." She unfolded it. Clara couldn't see the writing from where she stood, but she didn't need to. "My dearest Reed, Mrs. Callahan read, her voice dripping with disdain. "I count the hours until we can be together. The obstacles between us seem insurmountable, but my heart knows no bounds." She looked up. "Shall I continue?" "There are 6 more letters, each more impassioned than the last." The room spun. Clara grabbed the edge of a nearby chair. "I didn't write those," she said. "I've never written anything like that to anyone." "The handwriting matches your employment application." Mrs. Callahan's voice was final, executioner sharp. Mrs. Hendricks compared them herself. "Then someone forged—" Clara stopped. How could she prove it? She had nothing. No one here knew her. No one would believe her. Vanessa moved in for the kill. "You know what I think? I think you're exactly what everyone's saying. A desperate woman who heard about Reed Callahan's wealth and decided to try her luck. You probably thought you could show up, turn his head with some sob story, and worm your way into his life. That's not— You're a fortune hunter," Vanessa hissed. Or worse. The implication hung in the air. Clara's face burned so hot she thought she might combust. "Get out," Mrs. Callahan said, "before I have you removed." Clara nodded. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She just needed to leave, to get out of this nightmare, to— "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from the back of the room, and it changed everything. The crowd shifted, creating a path. A man walked through, and Clara understood immediately why the room had gone quiet. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like it had been combed into submission against its will. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of winter sky. He wore his formal suit like armor, uncomfortable but necessary. There was something dangerous about him, something that said he was more at home on horseback than in a ballroom. Reed Callahan. Had to be. He stopped a few feet from Clara, those cold eyes sweeping over her, the worn dress, the scuffed boots, the carpet bag clutched like a lifeline. "Reed, darling." Vanessa glided to his side, possessive fingers curling around his arm. "We were just handling an unfortunate situation." "What kind of situation?" His voice matched his appearance, rough, direct, with no pretense. Mrs. Callahan stepped forward. "This woman claims to be here for a seamstress position, despite the rather compelling evidence suggesting—" "She's not here for a seamstress position," Reed said. Clara's heart sank. Even he was going to condemn her. Mrs. Callahan smiled. "Exactly. So if you'll excuse us, we'll have Matthews escort her. She's here because I sent for her. The room went dead silent. Vanessa's fingers dug into Reed's arm. What? Reed pulled free of her grip, his expression unreadable. I sent for her. The job offer, the travel arrangements, all of it. Clara stared at him. What was he doing? Mrs. Callahan's face had gone pale. Reed, I don't understand. Why would you? Because she's my wife. The words hit like a dynamite blast. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. You're what? Vanessa's voice climbed to a register only dogs should hear. Reed's jaw tightened. My wife. We were married 2 months ago. I sent her away temporarily to handle some business in Philadelphia, and now she's come back. That's impossible, Mrs. Callahan said. You would never. I did. Reed looked at Clara for the first time, really looked at her, and something passed between them, a desperate, silent plea. Play along. Clara didn't understand. Didn't know what game this was or why he was protecting her, but she recognized a lifeline when she saw one. She lifted her chin. Hello, Reed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Vanessa's face had gone from pale to crimson. This is absurd. You're engaged to me. We're supposed to announce it tonight. That engagement was my mother's arrangement, Reed said flatly. Not mine. I already had a wife. You're lying. Vanessa's composure cracked completely. You're lying to get out of marrying me, and you're using this nobody to do it. Careful, Reed said, and something in his voice made Vanessa take a step back. Mrs. Callahan recovered first. She always would. Clara could see that. Women like her bent, but never broke. If what you say is true, she said, voice like frost, then where is the marriage certificate, the documentation? In my office safe, Reed said without hesitation. I'll have it brought out if you insist on making this into more of a spectacle than it already is. I insist on exactly that. Mrs. Callahan's eyes glittered. Because if you cannot produce proof, I'll know this is exactly what it looks like, a desperate lie to avoid your responsibilities. Reed nodded once. Matthews! An older man in butler's attire appeared from the side of the room. Sir, bring me the leather portfolio from the safe in my study. You know the one. Matthews hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Of course, sir. He disappeared. The silence that followed was excruciating. No one moved. No one spoke. They all just stood there, waiting. Clara's mind raced. What had she walked into? What was this man doing, and why? He just claimed her as his wife in front of what had to be the most powerful people in the territory. He destroyed his engagement, humiliated a beautiful woman who clearly loved him, or at least loved what he represented. For her. A stranger. It didn't make sense unless Clara looked around the room with new eyes. At Mrs. Callahan's rigid posture. At Vanessa's barely controlled fury. At the guests whispering behind gloved hands, scandal lighting up their faces like Christmas morning. This wasn't about her at all. This was about him, about power, about an arrangement he didn't want and couldn't escape. She was just the excuse. Matthews returned with a leather portfolio. He handed it to Reed, who opened it without ceremony. He pulled out a document, unfolded it, and held it up for his mother to see. Clara couldn't read it from her angle, but she saw Mrs. Callahan's expression change, saw the color drain from her face. That's impossible, the older woman whispered. How did you? It's legal and binding, Reed said. Filed with the county clerk 2 months ago. If you need additional verification, I can provide witnesses. He was bluffing. Had to be. But it was a good bluff, the kind that came from a man used to high-stakes poker games where lives and fortunes hung in the balance. Mrs. Callahan's hand trembled as she took the document. She read it, her lips pressing into a thin line. When she looked up, her eyes found Clara's, and in them was pure hatred. I see, she said quietly. How unexpected. Vanessa snatched the paper from her hands, read it, and threw it to the floor. This is fraud. It has to be. No one gets married and keeps it secret for 2 months. Apparently we did, Reed said. Why? Vanessa's voice broke. Why would you do this to me? For the first time, something like regret crossed Reed's face. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did! Tears streamed down her face, ruining her careful makeup. You stood there and let our families plan this celebration. Let me believe. She couldn't finish. Her father stepped forward, a tall man with a military bearing and a face like weathered stone. This is an outrage. The arrangements between our families were made without my consent, Reed said. I respect you, sir, but I won't be sold like cattle to consolidate ranching empires. Sold? The man's voice rose. I offered you an alliance that would have made you the most powerful rancher in 3 territories. I don't want power. I want my land and my freedom. Then you're a fool. Reed's smile was cold. Maybe, but I'm a married fool, so the discussion is finished. Vanessa's father looked like he wanted to hit something. Instead, he turned to his daughter. Come, we're leaving. Daddy? Now Vanessa. She looked at Reed one last time, her beautiful face twisted with pain and rage. You'll regret this, both of you. Then she swept out of the room, her father and a handful of guests following. The remaining crowd erupted into fevered whispers. Mrs. Callahan held up a hand and the room quieted. It seems we have much to discuss as a family. I think it's best if our guests, Rusty... No! Reed's voice cut through. We have nothing to discuss. Clara is my wife. She lives here now. That's the end of it. Reed. Mother, don't. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. I've played your games for years, followed your rules, let you run my life while I focused on keeping this ranch alive. But this? He gestured around the ballroom. This ends tonight. Mrs. Callahan's mask cracked just for a moment. Clara saw hurt flash across her face before the steel returned. Very well, she said quietly, if that's your choice. She turned to the remaining guests, her smile perfectly calibrated. I apologize for the disruption. It seems my son has a flair for the dramatic. Please, continue enjoying the evening. The champagne is still flowing. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The pianist started playing again, and slowly, reluctantly, the party resumed. But everyone kept glancing at Clara. Reed took her arm, his grip firm but not painful. Come with me. He led her out of the ballroom, down a hallway, and into a study lined with books and maps. He closed the door behind them and leaned against it, his eyes closing. That, he said, was a disaster. Clara found her voice. What did you just do? Saved you from being thrown out into the night. He opened his eyes, met hers. You're welcome. I didn't ask. You were about to be destroyed. His voice was flat, factual. My mother would have made sure word spread across every settlement from here to Montana. You'd never work again, never be able to show your face in polite society. I'm not polite society, Clara said. I'm a seamstress. Not anymore. The weight of those words settled over her. I don't understand any of this, she said. Those letters, the accusations, and now you're claiming I'm your wife? Why? Reed moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey, and poured himself a generous glass. He downed half of it before answering. Because I needed an escape route, he said, and you walked through my door at exactly the right moment. An escape route from what? From Vanessa, from my mother's plans, from being married off to consolidate ranching interests like I'm a prize bull. Clara's anger flared. So you decided to use me instead? To make me part of your lie? Yes. He didn't even have the grace to look apologetic. And before you get righteous about it, remember that I just saved you from public humiliation and probable destitution. So maybe we're even. Clara wanted to slap him, or scream, or both. Instead, she sank into a leather chair, her carpetbag falling to the floor. I can't do this, she said. I can't pretend to be your wife. I don't know how to be whatever it is you need me to be. You don't have to know. You just have to exist. Reed poured another drink, offered it to her. She shook her head. He shrugged and drank it himself. The marriage certificate is a forgery. A good one, but still fake. It'll hold up under casual scrutiny, but if anyone digs too deep, we're both finished. Then why? Because I had it prepared a month ago, when my mother first started pressuring me about Vanessa. I thought I might need it. Turns out I was right. Clara stared at him. You're insane. Probably. He sat on the edge of his desk. But I'm also desperate. The Hartley family, Vanessa's family, they've been trying to get control of Callahan land for a decade. They want to merge our ranches, squeeze out the smaller operations, and create a monopoly. My father fought them his whole life. He made me promise before he died that I'd never let that happen. So marry someone else. Anyone else. Why involve me? Because you're nobody, Reed said bluntly. No connections, no family with agendas, no expectations. You walked in here, and I saw a solution. A way out that doesn't involve alliances or politics or power plays. The truth of it stung, even though Clara had known it already. She was nobody. That's exactly what made her useful. I didn't write those letters, she said quietly. I know. Then who? Does it matter? Reed finished his drink. The damage is done. The story's out there. You're either my secret wife or you're a scheming fortune hunter who needs to be run out of town. Which would you prefer? Clara closed her eyes. 2 weeks ago, she'd been in Philadelphia, working in a factory, sleeping in a boarding house where the walls were so thin she could hear rats scurrying. She'd seen the advertisement for seamstress work in Wyoming. Good pay, room and board, respectable employment. It had seemed like a miracle. Now she understood. There were no miracles, just different kinds of traps. How long? She asked. What? How long do I have to pretend? Reed considered. A year, maybe less. Long enough for the scandal to die down, for my mother to accept it, for the Hartleys to find another target. Then we can quietly dissolve the marriage. I'll set you up somewhere with enough money to start over. You'll be free. And if I say no, then I'll have Matthews drive you into town tonight, give you enough money for a ticket east, and you'll leave. But Clara? He leaned forward. You'll leave with everyone thinking you're exactly what Vanessa called you, that will follow you forever. She hated him. Hated his cold calculation, his arrogance, the way he'd turned her life into a chess piece in his game, but he wasn't wrong. 1 year, she said. 1 year. And at the end, I get enough money to start a real life, somewhere far from here. You have my word, Clara laughed bitterly. The word of a man who just lied to a room full of people. Reed's smile was sharp. Fair point. I'll put it in writing. He pulled paper from his desk, dipped a pen in ink, and started writing. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for a rancher, all careful loops and straight lines. When he finished, he signed it and handed it to her. Clara read it. A contract, simple and direct. 1 year of service as his wife in name only. In exchange, room, board, protection, and at the end, $5,000 in safe passage to any destination she chose. $5,000. She could live on that for years, could start a business, buy a small house, have security for the first time in her life. All she had to do was lie for 12 months. I need a pen, she said. Reed handed her one. Clara Vance signed her name at the bottom of the contract, and with it, signed away any chance of a normal life. The room Reed's mother assigned her was bigger than any place Clara had ever lived. High ceilings, a 4-poster bed with actual curtains, a fireplace that worked, a private bathroom with running water that came out hot if you waited long enough. It should have felt like luxury. Instead, it felt like a prison. Mrs. Callahan had delivered Clara there personally, her smile cold and perfectly maintained. I've instructed the staff to treat you as they would any family member, she'd said, though I imagine that will take some adjustment for everyone involved. Then she'd left Clara alone with a trunk full of clothes that had been produced with suspicious speed. They fit, mostly, though they were finer than anything Clara had ever worn. Silk and soft wool and delicate lace that felt like it might tear if she breathed wrong. Someone had forged those letters. Someone had set this entire disaster in motion. But who? And why? Clara sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to make sense of it all. But exhaustion hit her like a physical force. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation, the lie, the contract, all of it drained away, leaving her hollow. She lay back on the bed, still wearing her worn calico dress, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd have to face the staff, the other guests, the territory full of people who now thought she was either a secret wife or a shameless schemer. Tomorrow, she'd have to learn how to be someone she wasn't. But tonight, just for a few hours, she could be nobody again. Clara closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. But she woke to shouting. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in Philadelphia, in the boarding house where fights erupted nightly over stolen food or perceived slights. Then she remembered. Wyoming, the Callahan estate, the lie. The shouting was coming from downstairs, Reed's voice and his mother's, both raised, both furious. Clara crept to her door and opened it a crack. Completely irresponsible, Mrs. Callahan's voice echoed up the stairs. Do you have any idea what you've done? I saved the ranch, Reed shot back. You humiliated me. You humiliated the Hartleys. You've made us the laughingstock of 3 territories. Better a laughingstock than controlled by them. The Hartleys are powerful, Reed. Vanessa's father won't forgive this insult. He'll come after us, after everything we've built. Let him try. A door slammed. Silence. Clara closed her own door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She'd walked into something bigger than a simple arranged marriage. This was about power, territory, and old grudges that ran deeper than she'd imagined. And somehow, she'd become a weapon in someone else's war. The sun rose slowly over the Wyoming frontier, painting the mountains gold and red. Clara stood at her window and watched it, this strange new world she'd stumbled into. She thought about running, taking what little she had and disappearing before this got worse. But where would she go? Back to Philadelphia and factory work that destroyed hands and spirits. West to California, where she knew no one and had no prospects. At least here, she had a contract, a guarantee. $5,000 in freedom if she could survive the year. Clara dressed in one of the provided gowns, a simple day dress in pale blue that probably cost more than she used to make in 6 months. She braided her hair, pinned it up, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked different, put together, almost respectable, almost like she belonged here. But the eyes staring back at her knew the truth. She was an imposter in a silk dress, and it was only a matter of time before everyone else figured it out too. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss? Mrs. Callahan requests your presence at breakfast. Clara's stomach twisted. I'll be right there, she called. She took one last look in the mirror, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door. Time to become Clara Callahan, the secret wife. Time to survive whatever came next. The breakfast room was smaller than Clara expected, though that wasn't saying much. It still had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that probably required a full-time staff, a table that could seat 20, and enough silver to buy a small farm. Mrs. Callahan sat at one end, reading a newspaper with the kind of focus that suggested she wasn't actually reading it at all. She didn't look up when Clara entered. Sit, she said. Clara chose a chair halfway down the table. Not too close, not too presumptuous, but not cowering at the far end either. She was learning the game already. Every choice was a statement. A young woman in a crisp black uniform appeared with coffee. She poured Clara a cup without making eye contact, her hand steady but her jaw tight. The staff had heard everything by now. Of course they had. Thank you, Clara said quietly. The woman nodded and disappeared. Mrs. Callahan finally set down her newspaper. Her eyes were the same winter sky blue as Reed's, but where his held something wild and dangerous, hers were calculated ice. I've been thinking about your situation, she said. Clara wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, grateful for something to hold. Have you? You're an intelligent woman. I can see that despite everything. So I'm going to speak plainly. Mrs. Callahan leaned forward slightly. I don't know what agreement you and my son have made, but I know it's not a real marriage. The question is, what do you want? Clara hadn't expected this. She'd braced herself for more accusations, more ice, maybe even an outright demand that she leave. I want what the contract says, she replied carefully. The contract. Mrs. Callahan's lip curled. Yes, Reed showed me that little document. Very thorough. He's always been thorough when it comes to protecting his interests. She paused. But contracts can be renegotiated. Can they? I could triple whatever he's offering you, right now. Cash and a ticket to anywhere you'd like to go. San Francisco, New York, even Europe if you prefer. All you have to do is leave today, tell everyone the marriage was a mistake, that you realized you couldn't go through with it. The offer hung in the air between them. Clara took a sip of coffee. It was perfect, rich, hot, with real cream. She'd forgotten coffee could taste like this. No, she said. Mrs. Callahan's eyebrows rose. You haven't even asked how much. Doesn't matter. I gave my word to Reed. Your word. The older woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've known my son for all of 12 hours. You owe him nothing. Maybe not, but I owe myself something. Clara met her eyes. I signed a contract. I keep my agreements. Something shifted in Mrs. Callahan's expression. Not respect exactly, but a recalculation. She was looking at Clara differently now, seeing something she hadn't expected. Very well, she said. Then we'll do this the hard way. What's the hard way? You want to be part of this family? You'll have to prove you deserve it. Reed can claim you're his wife all he wants, but unless you can function in our world, you'll be exposed as the fraud you are within a week. She stood, smoothing her skirts. You have rough hands, poor posture, and no idea how to navigate society. You'll make mistakes, dozens of them. And when you do, everyone will know exactly what you are. Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her voice level. Then I'll learn not to make mistakes. We'll see. Mrs. Callahan moved toward the door, then paused. Breakfast is at 7 sharp. Dinner at 6. We dress for both. Mrs. Hendricks will provide you with appropriate clothing and instruction on household expectations. I suggest you pay close attention. One misstep at the wrong time, and this entire charade collapses. She left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Clara sat alone in the breakfast room, her coffee growing cold, and tried to ignore the way her hands shook. The door opened again. Clara looked up, expecting another servant, but it was Reed. He'd changed from his formal wear into work clothes, denim and leather, a worn jacket, boots that had seen actual use. He looked more comfortable, more himself. I see you met my mother, he said. She offered me money to leave. Did she? Reed poured himself coffee, drank it standing. How much? She didn't say. Triple what you're offering. And? I said no. Reed studied her for a long moment. Why? Because I keep my word, and because I don't trust her. Clara set down her cup. She wants me gone, which means you need me here, so I'm staying. Something that might have been approval crossed his face. Good, because today's going to be rough. Rougher than yesterday? Much. He finished his coffee, set the cup down with more force than necessary. The Hartleys are coming back. Vanessa's father wants to discuss the situation. Formally. Clara's stomach dropped. When? This afternoon, 3 o'clock. What does that mean, formally? Reed's jaw tightened. It means he's going to try to prove our marriage is fake. He'll have questions, tests, things we should know about each other if we've actually been married for 2 months. If we can't answer them, the contract falls apart. Worse than that. He'll push for charges, fraud, forgery, maybe even conspiracy. He could destroy me legally if he gets enough evidence. Clara stood. Then we need to get our story straight. Already working on it. Reed pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I wrote down everything we need to know. When we met, where we got married, why we kept it secret, memorize it, all of it. By this afternoon, she took the paper, scanned it. The handwriting was the same as the contract. Neat, precise, completely at odds with the rough rancher in front of her. Where did we meet? She asked. Philadelphia, 3 months ago. I was there buying breeding stock and you were working at a textile factory near the stockyards. What factory? Belmont Mills. Clara looked up sharply. That's a real place. I worked there. Reed's expression didn't change. I know. I had someone research you after you sent in your employment application. You, Clara's anger flared. You've been planning this? Not specifically, but I've been planning something like it for months. I needed an exit strategy from Vanessa, and I needed it to be bulletproof. He pointed at the paper. Keep reading. Clara forced herself to focus on the words. According to Reed's fabricated story, they'd met when she brought him water during a tour of the factory floor. They talked about textile patterns, of all things, and discovered a shared interest in design. He'd sought her out the next day, taken her to dinner at a modest restaurant. 2 weeks of courtship followed, quiet, away from prying eyes. Then a simple ceremony at a county clerk's office, with 2 random witnesses pulled from the street. Why did we keep it secret? Claire asked. Because you insisted. You didn't want to be seen as someone marrying for money. You wanted to prove yourself first, build a life on your own terms. I respected that, so I agreed to wait until you were ready to come west. It was actually a decent story. It explained the secrecy, positioned Clara as principled rather than opportunistic, and gave Reed a reason to go along with it. "What about the letters?" she asked. "The ones your mother showed everyone?" Reed's expression darkened. "Those were real. Someone's been sending them to me using your name. I don't know who or why yet, but I'm working on it." "Could it be Vanessa?" "Maybe. Or her family. Or my mother trying to force my hand." He shrugged. "Doesn't matter right now. What matters is getting through today." A knock at the door. Mrs. Hendricks entered, a compact woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Clara recognized her immediately from the employment letter. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "your mother asked me to begin Miss Vance's instruction." "Mrs. Callahan," Reed corrected. "Her name is Mrs. Callahan now." Mrs. Hendricks' mouth tightened. "Of course. My apologies, Mrs. Callahan." The title sounded wrong in Clara's ears, like clothing that didn't fit. Reed turned to leave, then paused. "Clara, don't let them break you. You're stronger than you think." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with Mrs. Hendricks and a whole new set of impossible expectations. The next 4 hours were torture dressed up as education. Mrs. Hendricks walked Clara through the house, pointing out rooms and their purposes, introducing staff members whose names blurred together, explaining rules that seemed designed to trip her up. The morning room was for correspondence. The drawing room was for entertaining. The library was private family space. "Don't speak to the groundskeepers unless absolutely necessary. Always dress for dinner. Never enter the kitchen." That was Cook's domain. "You'll need to learn the household accounts," Mrs. Hendricks said, leading Clara into a small office off the main hallway. "Mrs. Callahan Sr. has always managed them, but as Reed's wife, you'll be expected to understand the finances." Clara looked at the ledgers stacked on the desk, columns of numbers, receipts, invoices. "I can do basic arithmetic." "This is more than basic." Mrs. Hendricks opened one of the ledgers. "The ranch employs 43 people year-round, more during cattle drives. Each has different wages, housing arrangements, and benefits. Then there's equipment maintenance, feed costs, veterinary care, property taxes, and investments. The household itself runs another 15 people. You'll need to approve expenditures, manage budgets, and prepare quarterly reports." Clara's head spun. "Quarterly reports for what?" "For the family trust. The Callahan estate isn't just a ranch. It's a business worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly more, depending on cattle prices." Mrs. Hendricks closed the ledger. "But we'll start with something simpler. Menu planning." Menu planning turned out to be anything but simple. Clara had to learn the preferences of family members, the capabilities of the kitchen staff, seasonal availability of ingredients, proper courses for different types of meals, and how to balance nutrition with presentation with budget. "Mrs. Callahan Sr. prefers French preparation," Mrs. Hendricks explained. "But Reed likes plain food, meat, potatoes, bread. You'll need to find a middle ground that doesn't offend either of them." "What if I just let the cook decide?" Mrs. Hendricks looked at her like she'd suggested burning down the house. "The lady of the house always sets the menu. It's a matter of authority. If you abdicate that responsibility, the staff will assume you're weak, and Mrs. Callahan Sr. will use it as evidence that you're unfit for your position." Everything was a test. Every decision, every conversation, every moment. By noon, Clara's head throbbed. She'd filled pages with notes, names, rules, procedures, but half of it had already started to blur together. "We'll continue after lunch," Mrs. Hendricks said. "You'll need to change first. The dress you're wearing is appropriate for morning, but lunch requires something lighter." "I don't know which dress." "I'll send Mary to help you. She'll be your lady's maid." "I don't need a maid." Mrs. Hendricks' expression was patient but firm. "Mrs. Callahan, every woman of your position has a lady's maid. It's not about need, it's about appearances. If you don't have one, people will talk. People are already talking. Then don't give them more ammunition." Mary turned out to be the same young woman who'd poured Clara's coffee at breakfast. She was maybe 20, with dark hair pinned back and nervous hands. She helped Clara change into a pale yellow dress that required 3 petticoats and a corset that made breathing an adventure. Then she redid Clara's hair, pulling it into an elaborate style that involved pins and twists Clara could never replicate on her own. "Have you worked here long?" Clara asked, trying to make conversation. 2 years, ma'am." Mary's voice was barely above a whisper. You don't have to call me ma'am. Clara is fine. Mary's hand stilled. Mrs. Hendricks says we're to address you properly. You're family now. Family. The word sat heavy and wrong. What do people think? Clara asked. The staff, I mean. About all this? Mary hesitated, her fingers fumbling with a hairpin. It's not my place to say, ma'am. I'm asking anyway. A longer pause, then, they think Mr. Reed's protecting you, that you must have gotten yourself in trouble somehow, and he's being noble about it. Clara's cheeks burned. They think I'm pregnant. Some do, yes. I'm not. I didn't say I believed it, ma'am. Mary finished with Clara's hair, stepped back. There. You look lovely. Clara looked at herself in the mirror. She did look lovely, in an unfamiliar way. The dress fit perfectly, the hairstyle was elegant, and with a bit of color in her cheeks from embarrassment, she almost looked like she belonged in this house. Almost. Mary, she said quietly, if I make mistakes, and I will you tell me? Privately, so I can fix them? Mary met her eyes in the mirror. That's not really proper, ma'am. I know, but I'm asking anyway. Something shifted in the girl's expression. A decision made. All right, she said, but only when no one else is watching. It was a small victory, but Clara would take it. Lunch was a silent affair. Just Clara and Mrs. Callahan Sr. eating delicate sandwiches and fruit that probably cost more than a week's wages. Reed was out with the ranch hands, Mrs. Hendricks had explained. He rarely ate midday meals at the house. Mrs. Callahan watched Clara like a hawk watching a rabbit. Every time Clara reached for the wrong fork or used her napkin incorrectly, those cold eyes noted it. Clara forced herself to eat slowly, to follow Mrs. Callahan's lead on which utensils to use, to keep her posture straight and her elbows off the table. It was exhausting. The Hartleys arrive at 3, Mrs. Callahan said, breaking the silence. I trust you'll comport yourself appropriately. I'll do my best. Your best may not be sufficient. She set down her fork with precision. Thomas Hartley is a shrewd man. He's built his fortune by identifying weaknesses and exploiting them. He will look for every crack in your story, every inconsistency, and when he finds them, and he will, he'll drive a wedge into them until everything splits apart. Then I won't give him any cracks. Mrs. Callahan's smile was thin. We'll see. At 2:30, Reed returned. He'd cleaned up, changed into clothes that split the difference between ranch work and formal wear. Dark trousers, a pressed shirt, a vest, but no jacket. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Ready? He asked Clara. No, but I don't suppose that matters. It doesn't. He took her arm and she felt the tension in him like a wire pulled too tight. Remember, we're in love. We've been married 2 months. Everything in that document I gave you is true. What if he asks something that's not in the document? Follow my lead, and whatever you do, don't hesitate. Hesitation looks like lying. They walked together into the drawing room, a space Clara had been in only briefly during Mrs. Hendricks's tour. It was all dark wood and heavy furniture, portraits of stern-looking Callahans staring down from the walls. Mrs. Callahan Sr. was already there, seated in a high-backed chair like a queen on a throne, and across from her, standing by the fireplace, was Thomas Hartley. He was exactly as Clara expected, tall, rigid, with steel-gray hair and eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. Vanessa stood beside him, her beautiful face a mask of controlled fury. Reed, Thomas said. His voice was measured, almost pleasant. Thank you for seeing us. Didn't have much choice, did I? Reed guided Clara to a settee, sat beside her. You made it clear this conversation was happening whether I wanted it or not. Because we deserve answers. Thomas's gaze shifted to Clara and she felt pinned by it. Mrs. Callahan, or should I say Miss Vance? It's Mrs. Callahan, Reed said. So you claim. Thomas moved closer, studying Clara like she was a horse he was considering buying. Forgive my bluntness, but your appearance here has been convenient. Almost too convenient. Convenient how? Clara asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. My daughter was humiliated last night. An engagement that had been carefully planned for months was destroyed. And you, a woman no one has ever heard of, suddenly appear with a marriage certificate that supposedly predates that engagement. He paused. It raises questions. The certificate is legal, Reed said. Perhaps, but legal documents can be forged. Dates can be falsified. Thomas pulled a paper from his pocket. I took the liberty of visiting the county clerk this morning. According to their records, your marriage was filed on March 15th, 2 months ago, exactly as you claimed. Clara felt Reed relax slightly beside her. However, Thomas continued, the clerk also noted something interesting. The filing was submitted by mail, not in person, which means anyone could have sent it, with any date they chose. The room went cold. Are you accusing me of fraud? Reed's voice was dangerous. I'm suggesting that the timing is suspicious, and that before we accept this marriage as legitimate, we deserve proof beyond a piece of paper. Thomas looked at Clara. Tell me, Mrs. Callahan, where exactly did you and Reed get married? Clara's mind raced through the document Reed had given her. Philadelphia, the county clerk's office on Market Street. What day? March 13th, a Wednesday. What time? 2 in the afternoon. Who were the witnesses? Clara hesitated for just a fraction of a second, not because she didn't know, but because she was pulling the names from memory. James Morrison and Sarah Chen. They were waiting in the hall, and Reed asked them to sign. Thomas's eyes narrowed. He was looking for the hesitation, the crack. What were you wearing? Vanessa asked suddenly. Her voice was sharp, hostile. Clara turned to her. I'm sorry? Your wedding day. What were you wearing? This wasn't in Reed's document. Clara looked at Reed, but his expression gave her nothing. She thought fast. What would someone like her, someone working in a factory, someone with no money, wear to a simple courthouse wedding? A blue dress, she said. Cotton, with small white flowers. It was the nicest thing I owned. How romantic, Vanessa said, her tone dripping sarcasm. And Reed? What was he wearing? Brown suit, white shirt, no tie. He said it made him feel like he was being strangled. She felt Reed shift beside her and prayed she'd guessed right. Where did you go afterward? Thomas asked. A restaurant. Small place, couple blocks from the courthouse. We had dinner and then Reed had to catch a train back west. What was the name of the restaurant? Clara's mind went blank. She hadn't expected details this specific. I don't remember, she said honestly. It wasn't fancy, just somewhere close. You don't remember the name of the restaurant where you had your wedding dinner? Vanessa's laugh was cruel. How convenient. It's been 2 months, Clara said, letting frustration creep into her voice. And we were focused on each other, not the name of the place. What did you eat? Thomas pressed. Chicken, roasted, with potatoes and carrots. And Reed? Clara looked at Reed, took a risk. Steak, she said, medium rare. He always orders steak when it's available. Reed's hand found hers, squeezed once, confirmation. This is absurd, Mrs. Callahan Sr. said from her chair. You're interrogating them like criminals. Because something doesn't add up. Thomas turned to Reed. If you were married in March, why announce it now? Why let my family plan an engagement celebration if you knew it was impossible? Because I'm a coward, Reed said flatly. I didn't know how to tell you, didn't know how to tell my mother. I kept putting it off, hoping Clara would arrive and solve the problem for me. He looked at Vanessa. I'm sorry. I should have been honest from the start. You should have, Vanessa said quietly. I deserved better than this. For the first time, Clara felt genuine sympathy for the woman. She was being used just as much as Clara was, a pawn in a game she hadn't chosen to play. Thomas wasn't done. I want to speak with the witnesses, Morrison and Chen. Where can I find them? Philadelphia, Reed said. Obviously. Where in Philadelphia? I don't know. We met them that day. Random people who agreed to help. How very convenient that your witnesses are impossible to locate. It was a courthouse wedding, not a society event. We took who we could get. The conversation was spiraling. Clara could feel it, could see Thomas building his case piece by piece. May I ask something? Clara said. Everyone looked at her. Why does it matter so much to you? She asked Thomas. Whether the marriage is real or not. Reed made his choice. Vanessa deserves better than being forced into a marriage with someone who doesn't love her. So why are you fighting this? Thomas's expression hardened. Because your husband owns the water rights to 15,000 acres. Because those rights are worth more than your limited understanding can comprehend. Because my family has worked for a decade to position ourselves for a merger that would have benefited both our ranches. So this is about money. This is about legacy, about building something that lasts. He stepped closer. And I won't let some factory girl destroy years of planning because she sees an opportunity to climb above her station. Thomas, Mrs. Callahan warned, but he ignored her. You want to know what I think? I think Reed panicked when he realized he'd have to marry Vanessa. I think he found you, some desperate woman with nothing to lose, and made you an offer. Play his wife for a while, get paid handsomely, and disappear when it's convenient. That's not, Clara started. Isn't it? Thomas pulled another document from his pocket. I did some research on you too, Miss Vance. You have no family, no connections, no prospects. You were working in a factory for pennies, living in a boarding house with 12 other women. Then suddenly you have an opportunity to come west, to live in luxury, to marry into one of the wealthiest families in Wyoming? He threw the paper on the table. You'd be a fool not to take that deal. Clara's cheeks burned. Every word he said was true, or close enough that denying it felt pointless. Enough, Reed said, standing. You've made your accusations. Now either prove them or get out of my house. Oh, I'll prove them. Thomas's smile was cold. I've already sent telegrams to Philadelphia. I'll have investigators looking into that courthouse filing, tracking down these mysterious witnesses, examining every detail of your story. And when I find the crack, and I will find it, I'll expose you both. Then I guess we'll see each other in court, Reed said. I guess we will. Thomas offered his arm to Vanessa. Come, daughter. We've wasted enough time here. Vanessa took his arm but paused at the door. She looked at Clara, and for just a moment, the mask dropped. Clara saw pain there, and confusion, and something that might have been pity. I hope it's worth it, Vanessa said quietly. Whatever he's paying you. Then they were gone. The room exhaled. Mrs. Callahan stood, smoothed her skirts. That could have gone better? Could have gone worse, Reed said. He'll find something. Thomas always does. Then we'll deal with it when he does. Reed turned to Clara. You did well, better than I expected. I don't feel like I did well. I feel like I'm about to be sick. Welcome to high society. Mrs. Callahan moved toward the door. I'll have Cook prepare something light for dinner. I suspect none of us will have much appetite. She left them alone. Reed sank back onto the settee, running his hands through his hair. I'm sorry. I didn't think he'd come at you that hard. Yes, you did. That's why you made me memorize everything. Fair point. He looked at her. The blue dress with white flowers. Where'd that come from? It's what I actually wore when I thought I was coming here to work. Seemed like something I'd wear to a wedding, too. And the steak? Lucky guess. You look like someone who eats a lot of beef. Reed laughed. Actually laughed, the sound surprising them both. I do eat a lot of beef. It's basically the family business. Clara found herself smiling despite everything. I noticed. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the windows, Clara could see ranch hands moving cattle in the distance, the mountains rising beyond them like sleeping giants. He's going to find out, she said quietly. Those witnesses don't exist. The restaurant doesn't exist. Any investigator worth his pay will figure it out in a week. Maybe. Or maybe I know some people in Philadelphia who owe me favors, people who might be willing to confirm a story if the price is right. Clara looked at him sharply. You're going to bribe witnesses? I'm going to protect what's mine. There's a difference. Is there? Reed met her eyes. You signed a contract. That makes you part of this ranch, part of this family for the next year. I protect my own, always. Something in his tone made Clara's chest tight. She wanted to argue, to say that bought loyalty wasn't real loyalty, that forcing people to lie made them all guilty of the fraud Thomas accused them of. But she was too tired, and somewhere along the way, between the interrogation and the lies and the weight of trying to be someone she wasn't, she'd started to understand Reed's desperation. They were both trapped, just in different cages. I need air, she said, standing. There's a garden behind the east wing. It's private. No one will bother you there. Clara nodded and fled before the walls could close in completely. The garden was beautiful, roses and herbs and flowering plants Clara couldn't name. A stone bench sat beneath a willow tree, and she collapsed onto it, finally alone. She'd survived her first full day as Clara Callahan. Barely. But Thomas Hartley was right about one thing. She was a factory girl playing at being something she wasn't. And every day she stayed here, the risk grew that someone would see through the performance. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the wind in the willow branches, trying to remember who she'd been before all this, before the lies and the contracts and the silk dresses. But that person was already fading, being replaced by someone harder, someone who could lie to a man's face and sleep at night, someone who was learning to survive at any cost. And Clara wasn't sure if that was strength or surrender. The days that followed became a strange rhythm of performance and survival. Clara woke at dawn, dressed in clothes that cost more than she used to earn in months, and pretended to be someone she wasn't. Breakfast with Mrs. Callahan Sr., who watched every movement like a naturalist studying an exotic specimen. Lessons with Mrs. Hendricks on household management, etiquette, the 1,000 invisible rules that separated people like the Callahans from people like Clara. Dinners where she and Reed played their parts. The loving newlyweds who couldn't keep their eyes off each other, whose hands found each other across the table, who smiled at private jokes that didn't exist. It was exhausting. 3 weeks in, Clara was managing the household accounts without making mistakes that would get her exposed. She could navigate a 7-course dinner without using the wrong fork. She'd learned which topics were acceptable conversation and which would mark her as common. The staff had stopped looking at her with open suspicion and settled into wary acceptance. But Thomas Hartley's investigation hung over everything like a coming storm. "He's got people asking questions in Philadelphia," Reed told her one night. They were in his study, going over the week's expenses. It had become their routine. After dinner, when his mother retired, they'd meet here and drop the pretense for an hour. 3 different investigators, from what my contacts say. They're being thorough. Clara's hand stilled over the ledger. "Have they found anything?" "Not yet. I paid 2 people to claim they were our witnesses, gave them the whole story, coached them on details. They'll hold up under casual questioning, but if Hartley brings in lawyers..." Reed shook his head. "It's a risk. Everything about this is a risk." "Yeah." He poured himself whiskey, offered her the bottle. She shook her head. "There's something else. Hartley's been buying up land. Small parcels mostly, ranchers who are struggling, can't make payments on their loans. He's creating a boundary around Callahan property." Clara looked up from the ledger. "Why?" "Control. If he owns everything around us, he controls our access to markets, water routes, cattle drives. He can strangle us slowly without firing a shot." Reed's jaw tightened. "It's what he does. Finds pressure points and squeezes until people give in." "What are you going to do?" "Fight. What else can I do?" He downed the whiskey in one swallow. "I've got meetings set up with some of the smaller ranchers, trying to convince them to hold out, but most of them are desperate. Hartley's offering cash they can't refuse." Clara closed the ledger. "There has to be something we can do." "We?" Reed raised an eyebrow. "This isn't your fight." "I'm playing your wife. That makes it my fight whether I want it or not." Something shifted in Reed's expression. He studied her for a long moment. "You're different than you were 3 weeks ago." "How?" "Harder, more confident, less like you're about to run." He paused. "I'm not sure if that's good or bad." Clara wasn't sure either. She felt herself changing, could sense it happening beneath her skin. The girl who'd walked through those doors, timid, desperate, willing to take whatever scraps were offered, was being replaced by someone who looked people like Thomas Hartley in the eye and didn't flinch. "Your mother thinks I'm corrupting you," Clara said. Reed laughed. "My mother thinks everyone's corrupting me. She's probably right." A knock at the door. Matthews entered, his expression grim. "Sir, there's a situation at the south pasture. Lightning struck near the horse barn. Small fire, but the horses are spooked. Mr. Davies thought you should know." Reed was on his feet immediately. "How bad?" "Fire's contained, but the horses broke through a fence section. They're scattered. Some ran toward the canyon." "That canyon's got a 60-foot drop." Reed grabbed his coat. "Get every available hand out there. We need those horses found before they hurt themselves." "Already done, sir, but with the storm rolling in..." "I know." Reed turned to Clara. "I have to go. This could take all night." "I'll come with you." "No. It's dangerous, and you don't know the terrain." "I grew up around horses. My father worked stables before he died. I can help." Reed hesitated. Clara could see him calculating the risk of bringing her versus the need for every pair of hands. "You ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Fine. But you stay close to me. If I tell you to do something, you do it. No questions." Clara was already moving toward the door. "Let's go." The storm hit as they reached the pasture. Wind first, whipping across the grassland hard enough to sting exposed skin. Then rain, cold and horizontal, turning the ground to mud within minutes. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating a scene of controlled chaos. Ranch hands on horseback, lanterns swinging, voices shouting over the wind. Davies, the ranch foreman, rode up. He was maybe 50, weathered and competent, with eyes that had seen everything twice. "We've rounded up about half," he yelled over the storm. But a group of 6 or 7 ran toward Devil's Canyon. "We can't see them in this weather." "How long ago?" Reed asked. 20 minutes, maybe less." Reed cursed. He turned to Clara. "Can you handle this?" He gestured to a brown mare one of the hands was holding. Clara swung up into the saddle, her expensive dress immediately soaked through and heavy. She should have changed, but there hadn't been time. "Yes." "Stay with Davies. I'm taking 3 men to the canyon." "I'm coming with you." "Clara, those horses are running scared in weather that's only getting worse. You need everyone you can get, and I told you, I know horses." She met his eyes. "I'm coming." Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but another crack of lightning made the decision for him. "Fine. Davies, you take the east search. We'll handle the canyon." They rode hard through rain that felt like needles. Clara's dress clung to her, the corset beneath making it hard to breathe, but she focused on the horse beneath her, on keeping her seat, on following Reed's silhouette through the darkness. The canyon appeared suddenly, a black slash in the earth that the lightning revealed in jagged glimpses. Reed pulled up short, the other riders clustering around him. "Spread out," he ordered. "Look for any sign they came this way. Hoof prints, broken brush, anything." Clara dismounted, led her horse along the canyon's edge. The wind was worse here, funneling through the gap with enough force to make her stagger. She kept low, scanning the ground, but the rain was washing away any tracks almost as fast as they formed. Then she heard it, a high, frightened whinny cutting through the storm. "Reed!" she shouted. "Over here!" He appeared at her side, water streaming down his face. "Where?" Clara pointed down into the canyon. Lightning flashed, and for just a second they could see. A ledge about 20 feet down, and on it, 3 horses huddled against the rock face. One was bleeding, its leg cut by something sharp. Another was a pregnant mare Clara recognized from the breeding records she'd been studying. "We can't leave them," Clara said. "We can't get down there either. Not in this storm. The rock's too slick." "Then we wait until it passes." "That mare's worth $5,000. If she goes over that edge—" "She won't." Clara was already pulling rope from her saddle. "If we can get a line down, make them feel like there's a way out, they'll stay put. Horses don't want to fall any more than we do." Reed grabbed her arm. "You're not going down there." "I'm the lightest one here, and I know how to calm a spooked horse." She shook off his grip. "We're wasting time." One of the other ranch hands spoke up. "She's right, boss. That ledge won't hold for long in this rain. Another hour, the whole thing could give way." Reed's jaw worked. Clara could see the war in his eyes, between keeping her safe and saving the horses that represented a chunk of the ranch's future. "I'll do it," she said. "Just tell me how." What followed was 20 minutes of Reed rigging a harness, explaining how she'd rappel down, what to do if the rope slipped, how to signal if she needed to be pulled up fast. His hands shook as he tightened the knots around her waist, and Clara realized with a strange shock that he was scared. Not for the horses. For her. "If anything goes wrong," he said, "you pull this cord twice, hard. We'll get you out." "Nothing's going wrong." "Clara, I've got this." She didn't, really. But she was learning that confidence and competence looked the same from the outside, and sometimes faking the first was enough to stumble into the second. The descent was terrifying. The rope bit into her waist through the soaked dress. The rock face was slick and offered no good handholds, and the wind kept slamming her against the stone hard enough to bruise. But Clara kept her eyes on the ledge below, on the horses who needed her to not panic. Her feet touched down. The ledge was maybe 10 feet across, barely wide enough for the 3 horses who pressed themselves against the back wall. The pregnant mare was shaking, her eyes rolling white. The injured one tried to rear but couldn't with the limited space. Easy, Clara murmured, keeping her voice low and steady. Easy, girl. Nobody's hurting you. She moved slowly, hands out, letting them see her. The mare screamed and stamped, but didn't bolt. There was nowhere to bolt to. Clara started humming, an old song her father used to sing in the stables, something wordless and repetitive. She'd seen him calm dozens of frightened horses with it, watched the sound cut through their panic better than any command. It worked now. The mare's ears swiveled forward, focusing on the sound. Her shaking slowed. Clara kept humming as she checked the injured horse's leg. Deep cut, but not fatal. It would need stitches, care, but the horse would survive. She used strips torn from a ruined dress to bind it, all the while humming that damn song. Above her, she could hear Reed shouting, but the wind tore his words away. The pregnant mare took a tentative step forward. Clara held still, let the horse come to her. When the mare's nose touched her shoulder, Clara slowly raised her hand, stroked the wet neck. "Good girl," she whispered. "We're getting you out of here." The third horse, a young gelding, had wedged himself into a crack in the rock and refused to move. Clara worked on him last, using her voice and gentle pressure until he finally, reluctantly, stepped out. Then came the hard part. Clara signaled up, 3 sharp tugs on the rope, the sign Reed had taught her that meant send down the harnesses. They lowered 3, one at a time. Clara fitted them onto the horses, working by feel in the darkness between lightning strikes. The pregnant mare first, because she was the most valuable, then the injured one. Finally, the gelding. Each time the ranch hands above would pull, the horse would resist, Clara would push and cajole and force, until finally the animal would scramble up the slick rock face to safety. When the last one was gone, Clara sagged against the canyon wall. She was shaking now, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. The rope came back down with a fresh harness. Clara strapped in and gave 2 hard pulls. The ascent was worse than going down. Her muscles were spent, and twice she lost her footing and spun wildly on the rope before catching herself. But hands grabbed her when she reached the top, pulling her over the edge. Reed was there. He pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they just stood there in the pouring rain while he held on like he'd forgotten how to let go. "You're insane," he said into her hair. "Completely insane. The horses are safe." "I don't care about the horses." Clara pulled back enough to see his face. His eyes were wild, and she realized he wasn't talking about the horses anymore. Then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks they'd performed for his mother, nothing like the careful affection they displayed at dinner. This was desperate and raw and real. Reed's hands fisted in her soaked hair, Clara's fingers digging into his shoulders, both of them shaking from cold and fear, and something neither wanted to name. When they broke apart, Reed pressed his forehead to hers. "We should get back," he said, voice rough, "before you freeze to death." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They rode back to the ranch in silence, the storm beginning to break. By the time they reached the barn, the rain had slowed to a drizzle and the first hints of dawn were lightening the eastern sky. Davies met them. "All accounted for. No major injuries except the one you found. Doc's already working on her." He looked at Clara, at her ruined dress and muddy face and bleeding hands. "Ma'am, you did good work tonight." "Thanks," Clara managed. She dismounted, her legs nearly giving out. Reed caught her elbow. "I'll get her inside," he said. "Make sure the mare gets the best care. And Davies? Not a word about tonight to anyone." Davies nodded, understanding immediately. The lady of the house wasn't supposed to go rappelling into canyons during storms. It wasn't proper. It wasn't safe. It wasn't what someone like Clara Callahan should do, but Clara Vance would have done it without thinking twice. They were halfway to the house when they saw her. Mrs. Callahan Sr. stood in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe, her face unreadable. "I heard the commotion," she said. "Are the horses safe?" "Yes," Reed said. Her eyes moved to Clara, taking in the destroyed dress, the rope's burns on her wrists, the mud and blood and exhaustion. "You went down into the canyon," she said. It wasn't a question. Clara lifted her chin. "The horses needed help." "The horses are worth money. You are supposedly my son's wife. There's a difference in value." "Mother," Reed started, but Mrs. Callahan held up a hand. She stepped forward, studied Clara's face. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost like she was talking to a real person instead of a problem to be solved. "Go get cleaned up," she said. "Mary's waiting upstairs. I'll have Cook prepare something hot." She paused. "You did well tonight. Foolishly, but well." Then she turned and walked back into the house, leaving them standing in the dawn light. "Was that a compliment?" Clara asked. "I think so. I'm not sure. I've never heard one from her before." They stood there another moment, neither quite ready to go inside and resume the performance. "About what happened," Reed said. "At the canyon? The horses are safe. That's what matters." "That's not what I meant." Clara knew, but acknowledging the kiss meant acknowledging that something had shifted between them, and she wasn't ready for that. This was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement. 1 year of pretending in exchange for freedom and money, except it wasn't simple anymore. "We should go in," she said, "before your mother changes her mind about that hot food." Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "Yeah, you're probably right." They walked into the house together, careful not to touch, both pretending the world hadn't tilted sideways in the rain. The telegram arrived 2 days later. Thomas Hartley's investigators had found inconsistencies in the witness statements. They wanted depositions, formal interviews, legal documentation, the kind of scrutiny that would crack Reed's carefully constructed lies wide open. "He's backing me into a corner," Reed said, staring at the telegram. They were in his study again, the door locked. "Either I produce evidence that doesn't exist, or I admit the marriage is fake." "What if we gave him something else?" Clara said. "Like what?" "Like a reason to back off that's more valuable than destroying you." She'd been thinking about this since the confrontation, watching the way power moved in this world. Hartley wants control. He wants to dominate the ranching territory. But what if he had competition that scared him more than you do? Reed leaned back in his chair. "You want to create a bigger threat. I want to make him see that crushing you makes his own position weaker." Clara pulled out the land records she'd been studying. "He's been buying up small ranches, right? Creating a stranglehold. But those ranchers sold because they were isolated, powerless. What if they weren't? You want to organize them. An association, a coalition, something that gives them collective bargaining power." Clara spread the maps out. "Look, there are at least 20 small operations within 50 miles. Individually, they're easy targets. Together, they could set prices, share resources, maybe even outbid Hartley when he tries to force them out." Reed stared at the maps. "That's never been done here. These ranchers, they're independent, stubborn. They don't trust each other." "Then make them trust you. You're a Callahan. You've got land, money, reputation. If you back this, others will follow. And if Hartley finds out I'm behind it, he'll have a choice. Come after you legally and risk turning every small rancher in 3 territories against him, or back off and accept that he can't control everything." Clara met his eyes. "Right now he's winning because you're fighting alone. Change the game." Reed was quiet for a long time. Then he started to smile. Not the cold, calculated smile he wore for society, but something genuine. "You're getting good at this," he said. "The strategy, the politics. Almost like you were born to it. Or like I'm desperate enough to learn." Clara started rolling up the maps. "When do we start?" "We? You need someone these ranchers will actually talk to. Someone who isn't a Callahan, who doesn't make them feel like they're being absorbed into your empire." She paused. "Someone like me." Reed looked at her differently now. Clara could feel it, the shift in how he saw her. Not as the desperate factory girl he'd rescued, not as the convenient lie he'd purchased. As a partner. "All right," he said. "We start tomorrow. Davies knows most of these men. We'll have him set up meetings, and you'll do the talking." "Me? You said it yourself. I'm a Callahan. That name carries weight, but it also carries threat. You're an outsider. That makes you neutral ground." Reed stood, walked to the window. "Besides, after what you did in that canyon, word's spreading. People are curious about you." "What kind of word?" "That Reed Callahan's mysterious wife isn't what anyone expected. That you've got nerve." He glanced back at her. "Davies told the story to a couple of the hands. By now, half the territory probably knows you climbed into a canyon during a lightning storm to save horses." Clara's stomach flipped. "I thought you told him not to say anything." "I told him not to say anything to anyone in the house. I never said anything about the bunkhouse, the saloons, Or the general store? Reed's smile was calculating now. Sometimes the best way to control a story is to let it spread naturally. People believe gossip more than they believe announcements. You used me. I used the truth. You did something remarkable. Now we leverage it. Clara should have been angry, should have felt manipulated, turned into another chess piece in Reed's constant maneuvering, but she wasn't, because she was starting to understand the game, and more than that, she was starting to get good at playing it. Fine, she said. Set up the meetings. I'll do the talking. But Reed? She waited until he looked at her. Next time you plan to turn me into a legend, warn me first. Where's the fun in that? Despite herself, Clara smiled. The first meeting was with Jacob Brennan, who ran a struggling cattle operation 40 miles east. Reed and Clara rode out at dawn, just the two of them. Mrs. Callahan had raised objections. It wasn't proper for them to travel alone, even if they were married. But Reed had shut her down with a look. The Brennan ranch was smaller than Clara expected. The house weathered and in need of repair. Jacob himself was maybe 40, with the kind of lean hardness that came from too much work and not enough food. He met them in the yard, rifle resting casually in the crook of his arm. Callahan, he said, didn't expect to see you out this way. Jacob. Reed dismounted, helped Clara down. This is my wife, Clara. Jacob's eyes swept over her, assessing. Heard about you? Heard you're not what you seem. Depends on what people think I seem like, Clara said. A brief smile flickered across Jacob's face. Fair enough. Come inside. Coffee's hot. They sat at a rough wooden table while Jacob's wife, a thin woman with worry lines carved deep, poured coffee that was more chicory than bean. I know why you're here, Jacob said. Hartley made me an offer last month. Good money for land that's breaking my back to keep. Are you going to take it? Reed asked. Don't know yet. Depends on whether I've got a better option. Jacob looked at Clara. Word is, you've got ideas about that. Clara set down her cup. I've been looking at the numbers, at how Hartley operates. He's not just buying land, he's buying isolation. Every rancher he squeezes out makes the others weaker. Eventually you're all alone with no bargaining power. Tell me something I don't know. What if you weren't alone? What if 20 ranchers pooled resources, set collective prices, shared equipment and labor during drives? Clara pulled out the papers she'd prepared. You'd have negotiating power. Hartley couldn't pick you off one by one. Jacob looked at the papers but didn't touch them. And who runs this coalition? Let me guess. Reed Callahan. No, Clara said. It's democratic. One ranch, one vote. The Callahans get the same say as everyone else. Then why would Reed back it? Because crushing Hartley helps everyone, including us. Clara leaned forward. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is charity. Reed benefits if Hartley's stopped. But so do you. So does every small rancher who's barely hanging on. We're offering a way to fight back that doesn't require you to sell your soul or your land. Jacob was quiet. His wife put a hand on his shoulder. We've been on this land 20 years, she said softly. Raised our children here. I don't want to lose it. You won't, Clara said. Not if we stand together. Jacob looked at Reed. You trust her? She speaks for you? She speaks for herself, Reed said. But yeah, I trust her. Another long silence. Then Jacob reached out and took the papers. I'll read these, he said. Talk to some others. But I'm not promising anything. That's all we're asking, Clara said. They had the same conversation 6 more times over the next 2 weeks. Some ranchers were receptive. Others slammed doors in their faces. But slowly, carefully, Clara built something that had never existed before. A network of small operators who were willing to consider working together. And with every meeting, every negotiation, every small victory, Clara felt the last pieces of her old self falling away. She wasn't Clara Vance anymore. The girl who'd worked in factories and lived in boarding houses and accepted whatever scraps the world offered. She was becoming someone else. Someone harder and smarter and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who scared her a little, but someone who could survive. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Thomas Hartley showed up at the ranch with 2 lawyers and a county sheriff. They had depositions, court orders, and enough legal firepower to bury Reed under paperwork and accusations. Mrs. Callahan met them in the drawing room, her face carved from ice. This is harassment. This is due diligence, Hartley said. Your son has made claims that don't hold up to scrutiny. We have proof that the witnesses to his supposed marriage were paid to lie. We have evidence that the filing was backdated. And we have testimony from the county clerk that the paperwork was submitted by mail, which violates standard procedure. None of that proves fraud, Mrs. Callahan said. It proves enough to warrant a formal investigation, which means depositions, financial audits, and a very public trial. Hartley's smile was thin. Unless, of course, Reed is willing to be reasonable. Reed stood in the doorway, Clara beside him. Define reasonable. Admit the marriage is fake, annul it quietly, and reconsider the merger with my family that would have happened if you hadn't pulled this stunt. So you want me to prove you right, destroy Clara's reputation, and hand you control of my water rights. Anything else? Don't be dramatic. I'm offering you a way out that doesn't involve jail time. Clara felt Reed tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm, felt the muscle coiled tight beneath her fingers. No, Reed said. I'm sorry? No, we're not annulling anything. We're not admitting anything. And we're sure as hell not merging with you. Reed stepped forward. But here's what we are going to do. We're going to fight you. In court, in business, in every way that matters. And when we're done, you're going to wish you'd taken the loss and moved on. Hartley's expression darkened. You can't win this fight, boy. Watch me. The sheriff stepped forward. Mr. Callahan, I have orders to bring you in for questioning. You can come willingly, or I can make this official. Clara's mind raced. If Reed went with them, if he submitted to depositions without preparation, Hartley's lawyers would tear him apart. They'd find every inconsistency, every crack in the story, and by the time they were done, Reed would be facing criminal charges. She made a decision. The marriage is real, Clara said. Everyone turned to look at her. Clara, Reed started. It's real, she repeated, louder now. I know everyone has doubts. I know the circumstances look suspicious. But Reed and I got married in Philadelphia 2 months ago because we loved each other, and we kept it quiet because I wasn't ready to face this world. That's the truth. Hartley laughed. You expect us to believe that? I don't care what you believe. I know what's real. Clara looked at the sheriff. You want depositions? Fine. I'll answer every question you have. I'll submit to interviews, background checks, whatever you need. But you're not taking my husband anywhere without proper legal representation. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I have my orders, and I have rights. We both do. If you want to question Reed, do it with his lawyer present. If you want to accuse us of fraud, file formal charges, and we'll see you in court. But you're not dragging him away like a criminal based on Thomas Hartley's vendetta. Reed stared at her. She could see surprise there, and something else. Something that looked almost like pride. Hartley's smile faded. You're making a mistake. Probably. I'm good at those. Clara crossed her arms. But I'm Reed's wife, which means his fights are my fights. So either arrest us both or get out of our house. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, the sheriff cleared his throat. I'll need to consult with the county attorney. This isn't quite how I expected things to go. Take your time, Clara said. We're not going anywhere. Hartley gathered his lawyers and left, but not before turning back at the door. This isn't over. It never is with you, Reed said. When they were gone, Mrs. Callahan sank into a chair. That was either very brave or very stupid. Both, Clara said. Definitely both. Reed caught her arm, pulled her aside. Why did you do that? Because you were about to get destroyed. You could have let them. Could have taken the deal, admitted it was fake, walked away with money and no consequences. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd saved her from humiliation that first night, who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd kissed her in the rain like the world was ending. I'm not walking away, she said. Not from this. Not from you. The words hung between them, meaning more than either wanted to admit. Reed's hand moved to her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Clara Vance, he said quietly. What the hell are you doing to me? The same thing you're doing to me. He kissed her then, and it was different from the canyon. Slower, deliberate. A choice instead of a reaction. When they broke apart, Reed pressed his forehead to hers. We're really doing this, aren't we? Fighting Hartley. Risking everything. Looks like it. And if we lose? Then we lose together. Reed smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he wore for the world. I can work with that. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again. But for the first time since Clara had walked through those doors, she wasn't scared of what was coming. She was ready. The coalition meeting was set for Saturday at the Brennan Ranch. Clara spent the week preparing, organizing notes, mapping out arguments, anticipating objections. She'd invited 14 ranchers, knowing maybe half would show. Any more than that was dreaming. 12 came. They gathered in Brennan's barn because his house couldn't hold that many people. Rough men with rougher hands, wearing suspicion like armor. Their wives came too, which surprised Clara until she realized the women were the ones who managed the books, who knew exactly how close to the edge their families were running. Clara stood at the front, acutely aware that she was the youngest person in the room by at least a decade, that her dress probably cost more than some of these families made in a month, that she'd been in Wyoming less than 2 months and was about to tell people who'd lived here their whole lives how to save their land. Reed stood against the back wall, arms crossed. They'd agreed he wouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary. This had to come from her. "Thank you for coming," Clara started. Her voice sounded thin in the big space. She cleared her throat, tried again. "I know most of you don't know me. You've heard stories, some true, some not. But here's what matters. Thomas Hartley is buying up land, your land. And if we don't do something, in 6 months he'll own everything from here to the Montana border." "We know that already," said a man named Carson, who ran cattle north of the Callahan spread. "Question is, what can we do about it? Hartley's got money. We don't." "He's got money," Clara agreed. "But we've got numbers, and we've got something he can't buy. We actually care about this land beyond what it's worth on paper." "Pretty words don't pay bills," said a woman named Ruth, whose husband had died the previous winter, leaving her with 3 children and 2,000 acres she couldn't work alone. "Hartley offered me cash. Real money. Enough to start over somewhere easier. Why shouldn't I take it?" Clara had been expecting this. She pulled out the paper she'd prepared. "Because he's offering you 30 cents on the dollar. Your land is worth at least 3 times what he's paying, probably more. But you can't access that value because you're isolated. You can't get your cattle to market without crossing Hartley land, which means he sets the toll fees. You can't negotiate fair prices with buyers because you're one small voice against his empire." "So what's your solution?" Carson asked. "A rancher's cooperative. We pool resources, share equipment, coordinate cattle drives. We negotiate as a block with buyers, which means better prices for everyone. We establish shared grazing rights so no one rancher bears the full cost of maintaining land." Clara spread her papers on a hay bale. "I've drawn up a basic framework. Each ranch maintains independence, but we work together on the things that matter: shipping, sales, supply purchasing." Jacob Brennan stepped forward, studied the papers. "And who runs this cooperative?" "We all do. One ranch, one vote, regardless of size. The Callahans don't get more say than anyone else." "Why would Reed agree to that?" Ruth asked, eyes narrowing. "His ranch is worth more than all of ours combined." Reed spoke from the back. "Because Hartley's not just after your land. He's after mine too. And I'd rather share power with neighbors than lose everything to him." An older rancher named Samuel, who'd been quiet until now, raised his hand. "I've known the Callahan family 30 years. Reed's father fought Hartley tooth and nail, died still fighting. I respect that. But I also know that big ranches eat small ones. That's how it works. What's to stop this cooperative from just being another way for you to control us?" Clara met his eyes. "Nothing, if you don't stay vigilant. That's why everything's voted on. That's why we put it in writing, with lawyers, so no one can change the rules later." She paused. "Look, I'm not asking you to trust me. I know I'm an outsider, but I'm asking you to trust yourselves. You've survived out here through droughts and hard winters and market crashes. You know how to work together when you have to. This is just making it official." "What about costs?" asked a younger rancher named Tim. "Setting this up, running it, that takes money we don't have." "Initial costs are covered by the Callahan Ranch," Clara said. "Legal fees, administrative setup, first-year operating expenses. After that, the cooperative funds itself through a small percentage of each sale. The numbers are in the proposal." Carson shook his head. "Why? Why would Reed bankroll this?" "Because it's an investment," Reed said, "in destroying Hartley's monopoly and making sure small ranchers survive. And yeah, in protecting my own interests. I'm not claiming to be a saint here, but our interests align. That's enough. The ranchers looked at each other, silent conversations happening in glances and nods. Clara's heart hammered. This whole plan lived or died in this barn in the next few minutes. Finally, Jacob spoke. I'll join, but I want everything in writing, reviewed by my own lawyer. And if at any point this cooperative starts favoring the Callahans over the rest of us, I'm out. Fair, Clara said. I'm in too, Ruth said, but same conditions. First sign this becomes a Callahan takeover, I walk. One by one, the others agreed. Not all of them. 3 ranchers left without committing, saying they needed more time, but 9 signed on. 9 ranches representing thousands of acres and dozens of families. It was enough to start. After the meeting, as people filed out, Samuel pulled Clara aside. You did good work today, girl, but you should know Hartley's going to come after you for this. Not Reed, you. He'll see you as the weak link. Let him try. Samuel's smile was sad. You've got spine. I'll give you that. Just remember, spine doesn't stop a bullet, and Hartley doesn't fight fair. The old man left. Clara stood in the barn watching dust motes drift through the afternoon light and wondered what she'd just started. Reed approached, slipped an arm around her waist. You were incredible. I was terrified. Didn't show. He kissed her temple. Come on, let's get home before my mother decides we've been murdered by hostile ranchers. The ride back was quiet. Clara's mind was already racing ahead, to contracts that needed drafting, schedules that needed coordinating, the 1,000 details that would make or break this fragile alliance. You're doing it again, Reed said. Doing what? Planning 6 steps ahead. I can see it in your face. He reached over, took her hand. It's going to work, Clara. What you built today, it's real. Or it falls apart the first time someone disagrees about something. Maybe, but you gave them a chance. That's more than they had yesterday. Clara looked at him, at this man who'd become so much more than the desperate stranger who'd claimed her as his wife. What happens when the year's up? The question hung between them, unspoken until now. Reed's jaw tightened. I don't know. The contract says, I know what the contract says. His hand squeezed hers. But things are different now. We're different. Are we? You know we are. Clara did know. Somewhere between the lies and the fear and the fights, something real had grown. She'd fallen for him, not the cattle baron with the empire, but the man who checked on horses at midnight, who listened when she talked about cooperative economics, who'd looked at her like she was worth saving even when she wasn't sure she was. We should talk about this, she said. We should, but not now. Right now we've got a legal battle to prepare for and a territory to convince that we're not criminals. Reed's smile was wry. One impossible thing at a time. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and red. Mrs. Callahan met them at the door, her expression unreadable. There's a telegram, she said, holding out the yellow paper. From Hartley's lawyers. Reed took it, read it, and his face went dark. He handed it to Clara without a word. The message was simple and devastating. Hartley had filed formal charges. Fraud, conspiracy to defraud, falsification of legal documents. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks. If the charges stuck, Reed faced up to 5 years in prison. Clara felt the world tilt. Can he actually do this? He can try, Mrs. Callahan said. Whether he succeeds depends on how good our lawyers are and how much evidence he's manufactured. Manufactured? Thomas Hartley doesn't fight clean, girl. If he doesn't have evidence, he'll create it. Witnesses who'll swear to anything for the right price, documents that look authentic. He's done it before. The older woman's face was grim. We need to prepare for war. The next 2 weeks were a blur of lawyers and depositions and desperate strategy sessions. Reed's attorneys were good, expensive and experienced, but even they looked worried when Hartley's evidence kept piling up. Affidavits from people claiming Clara had asked them to forge documents. Bank records showing suspicious payments. A letter allegedly written by Clara to a friend back east, bragging about tricking a rich rancher into marriage. It's all fake, Clara said, staring at the letter that bore her name in handwriting that wasn't quite hers. I never wrote this. Don't even know anyone named Margaret Simmons. Doesn't matter if it's fake, the lead attorney said. His name was Harrison, and he had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. What matters is whether we can prove it's fake before a judge believes it's real. Can we? Reed asked. Harrison hesitated. Maybe, but Hartley's been thorough. Every piece of evidence has just enough authenticity to create doubt. That's all he needs. Reasonable doubt about your marriage. The judge doesn't have to believe you're guilty, just that there's enough smoke to indicate fire. So what do we do? Clara asked. We go on offense. We stop defending and start attacking. Hartley's not clean. No one builds an empire like his without cutting corners. We dig into his business practices, his land acquisitions, his financial dealings. We make this about him, not about you. Reed leaned back in his chair. How long will that take? Weeks? Maybe months? We'd need investigators, time to build a case. We don't have months, Clara interrupted. The hearing is in 10 days. Harrison spread his hands. Then we do the best we can with what we have and hope the judge is more interested in justice than politics. It wasn't enough. Clara could see it in Reed's face, in the way his mother's hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. They were losing, and everyone knew it. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced her room, mind churning through possibilities and finding nothing but dead ends. Around 2 a.m, she gave up and went downstairs to the library, thinking maybe a book would distract her. She found Mrs. Callahan already there, sitting in front of a low fire with a glass of brandy. Can't sleep either? The older woman asked. No. Pour yourself a drink. Might help. Clara poured brandy into a glass, sat in the chair across from her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. I misjudged you, Mrs. Callahan said finally. When you first arrived, I thought you were exactly what Thomas said, an opportunist looking for an easy life. I was desperate. That's close enough. Perhaps. But desperation doesn't explain what you've become. Mrs. Callahan looked at her. You've changed my son. Made him think beyond this ranch, beyond the fights his father left him. You've given him something to build instead of just defend. Clara didn't know what to say to that. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone, Mrs. Callahan continued. Reed's father, James, he wasn't born a Callahan. He married into the name, just like you. His family was nobody, and mine was everything. My father fought the marriage for years. What changed his mind? He died. And by then, James had proven himself 100 times over. But those first years, she shook her head. They were hell. Every mistake was proof he didn't belong. Every success was dismissed as luck. It took a decade before people stopped seeing him as an interloper. Why are you telling me this? Because you don't have a decade. Hartley's going to try to destroy you in 10 days, and if he succeeds, he destroys Reed too. Mrs. Callahan set down her glass. So I'm asking, what are you willing to do to stop him? Clara met her eyes. Anything. Even if it means admitting the marriage was a lie? The question hit like a punch. What? What if the only way to save Reed is to take the fall yourself? Claim you deceived him, that he was innocent in all this, that you were the architect of the fraud. Mrs. Callahan's voice was steady, businesslike. You'd face charges, possibly jail time, but Reed would be free. The ranch would survive. Clara's hand shook. You're asking me to destroy myself to save him. I'm asking what you're willing to sacrifice. The older woman leaned forward. Because love isn't the pretty speeches and the stolen kisses. It's the choice you make when everything's on fire and someone has to burn. I won't do it. Even if it's the only way? There has to be another way. There isn't. I've been through the evidence, talked to the attorneys. Hartley's case is too strong. The only option is for one of you to take full responsibility, and it can't be Reed. He's a Callahan. The family needs him. Mrs. Callahan stood. Think about it. You have time, but not much. She left Clara alone with the fire and the terrible weight of the choice. Clara sat there until dawn, turning it over in her mind. She could confess, claim she'd manipulated Reed, throw herself on the court's mercy. She'd go to jail, maybe for years, but Reed would be safe. The ranch would survive. The coalition she'd built would have a chance. All it would cost was everything. Or she could fight. Could go into that courtroom and lie her heart out, stake everything on a performance good enough to convince a judge. Risk both of them in one desperate gamble. The sun rose, painting the library in soft gold light. Clara watched it and made her decision. She found Reed in the stables, checking on the pregnant mare who'd survived the storm. The foal had been born healthy a week ago, was already standing and nursing. "Hey," Reed said when he saw her. "You look like you've been up all night." "Your mother offered me a deal." Reed's expression changed. "What kind of deal?" Clara told him. "Everything. The confession plan, the sacrifice, the choice between saving him or fighting together." When she finished, Reed was quiet for a long time. The mare nuzzled her foal, oblivious to the human drama playing out nearby. "And you're telling me this because," Reed said finally, "because I'm not taking the deal. I'm not confessing to something I didn't do, and I'm not letting you face this alone." Clara stepped closer. "We fight together, or we go down together. Those are the only options I'm willing to consider." Reed cupped her face in his hands. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most stubborn." "Probably both." He kissed her, soft and slow, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. "All right," he said when they broke apart. "We fight. But Clara, if it goes bad, if we lose, we'll deal with it then. I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If they convict us, if we're both facing prison, you'll let me claim I coerced you, that I forced you into this arrangement. I'll say whatever it takes to get you a lighter sentence." "No." "Clara, no." She grabbed his shirt, pulled him close. "I'm done being saved. I'm done being the victim who needs rescuing. We're in this together, and that means we face whatever comes together. Equal partners, equal consequences." Reed stared at her, and Clara saw the moment he understood. She wasn't the desperate factory girl anymore, wasn't someone who could be protected or shielded from the hard truths. She'd become someone who stood her ground and took her hits and kept moving forward. "Equal partners," he repeated. "Equal partners." "All right then." Reed pulled her into his arms, held on tight. "Let's go to war." The hearing was held in the county courthouse, a stone building that had been standing since before Wyoming was even a territory. Clara wore her best dress, dark blue, conservative, the kind of thing a respectable rancher's wife would wear. Reed was in a formal suit that made him look like a stranger. The courtroom was packed. Thomas Hartley sat with his lawyers, looking confident. Vanessa was there too, her face carefully blank. Half the territory had shown up to watch the spectacle. Judge Morrison was maybe 60, with white hair and a face that had seen everything twice. He called the court to order, and Hartley's lead attorney stood. What followed was 3 hours of systematic destruction. Witness after witness testified to seeing Clara and Reed fight, to hearing Clara brag about manipulating a rich rancher, to watching Reed pay people to lie about the marriage. The forged letter was entered into evidence. The suspicious bank records, the questionable witness statements. By lunch, it looked hopeless. Harrison did his best on cross-examination, poking holes where he could, but there were too many pieces of evidence and not enough time to dismantle them all. Then Clara took the stand. Hartley's attorney circled like a shark. "Mrs. Callahan, or should I say Miss Vance, you claim this marriage is legitimate. It is legitimate. Yet you can't produce witnesses who actually remember you. The restaurant where you allegedly had your wedding dinner has no record of your reservation. The county clerk remembers a mail-in filing, but no couple matching your description. We got married quietly. We didn't need a production." "How convenient." The attorney pulled out the forged letter. "Can you explain this letter where you brag about tricking Reed Callahan?" "I didn't write it." "It's your handwriting. It's similar, but it's not mine. Someone forged it." "Someone forged an entire letter, complete with personal details, just to frame you?" "Yes." "That seems unlikely, doesn't it?" Clara looked directly at Thomas Hartley. "Not if someone was willing to pay enough for it." The courtroom stirred. Hartley's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. The attorney pressed harder, trying to trip her up on dates and details, but Clara stuck to her story. She didn't embellish, didn't cry or plead, just answered every question with the same steady certainty. When it was Harrison's turn, he was brief. "Mrs. Callahan, why did you marry Reed?" "Because I loved him." "And do you still?" Clara looked at Reed, at the man who'd saved her, who'd believed in her, who'd become her partner in every way that mattered. "Yes," she said. "I love him more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." It wasn't a legal argument. It wasn't evidence, but it was truth, raw and unadorned, and the courtroom felt it. Harrison called Reed next. The questions were similar: dates, details, the story they'd rehearsed 100 times. But then Harrison went off script. "Mr. Callahan, did you pay people to pose as witnesses to your marriage?" The courtroom went silent. It was the question everyone had been waiting for, the one that could destroy everything. Reed looked at the judge. "Yes." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Clara's heart stopped. "Why?" Harrison asked calmly, like he'd expected this. "Because my original witnesses couldn't be found. James Morrison moved to California. Sarah Chen died in a factory fire. I panicked. I thought if I could just produce people who'd confirm the story, it would buy time to find real proof." Reed's voice was steady. "It was stupid and illegal, and I'm not proud of it. But it doesn't make the marriage fake. It just makes me desperate." "Desperate enough to forge a marriage certificate?" "No, that certificate is real. The marriage is real. Everything else, the paid witnesses, the defensive lies, that came after, when Thomas Hartley decided to destroy us." Hartley's attorney was on his feet. "Objection! The defendant is making unfounded accusations. Mr. Hartley is not on trial here," Harrison said. "But his actions are relevant. He's been systematically buying up ranches, forcing out competitors. And when Reed Callahan refused to be bought, he decided to destroy him legally instead." "That's absurd," Hartley's attorney sputtered. "Is it?" Harrison pulled out a folder. "I have documents showing land purchases made by Hartley Enterprises at well below market value. I have testimony from ranchers who were threatened with financial ruin if they didn't sell. I have evidence of price fixing, illegal toll fees, and monopolistic practices that would make railroad barons blush." He spread the papers on the defense table. Clara stared at them, shocked. Where had he gotten all this? "This case isn't about whether Reed Callahan's marriage is real," Harrison said. "It's about a powerful man using the legal system to crush a competitor. And the evidence, the real evidence, not forged letters and paid testimony, proves it." The judge held up a hand. "That's enough. I'll review all evidence in my chambers and issue a ruling within the week." He looked at Reed. "Mr. Callahan, you've admitted to serious crimes here today. I could hold you in contempt." "I know, Your Honor." "Why confess to something that could destroy you?" Reed looked at Clara. "Because I'm tired of lying. Because whatever happens, I want it to be based on truth, not another layer of deception." He turned back to the judge. "My marriage to Clara is real. Everything I did to defend it, the paid witnesses, the desperate measures, that was me trying to protect something that matters more than land or money or reputation. If that's a crime, I'll accept the punishment, but don't let Thomas Hartley use this court to steal what he couldn't buy." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Clara and Reed stood on the steps while journalists shouted questions and cameras flashed. Reed's hand found hers, held tight. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," Clara said. "Probably both." "Where did Harrison get all those documents?" "I have no idea, but remind me to give him a raise." They walked to the carriage, heads high, and drove back to the ranch through a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Mrs. Callahan was waiting in the drawing room. She looked at Reed for a long moment, then did something Clara had never seen before. She smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said quietly. "That was the most Callahan thing I've ever seen, confessing to crimes just to make a point." "Did I just destroy us?" Reed asked. "Maybe. Or maybe you just saved us in a way I didn't think was possible." She looked at Clara. "You both did." The week that followed was agony. Every day brought new speculation in the newspapers, new rumors about what the judge would decide. The ranchers and the coalition sent messages of support, but Clara could feel their nervousness. If Reed went to prison, the whole alliance would collapse. Finally, on Thursday, the ruling came. Judge Morrison had reviewed all evidence and found it inconclusive. The marriage certificate appeared legitimate, though questions remained about certain procedural details. Reed's admission of paying false witnesses was troubling but understandable given the circumstances. Thomas Hartley's business practices warranted further investigation. Therefore, the charges were dismissed with a warning. If any further evidence of fraud emerged, the case would be reopened. In the meantime, both parties were instructed to cease their legal warfare and focus on legitimate business. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't a loss either. That night, the ranch celebrated. Staff brought out bottles of wine that had been saved for special occasions. Davies and the ranch hands raised glasses to Reed and Clara. Even Mrs. Callahan allowed herself a small smile. Clara stood on the porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Reed found her there. You all right? Better than all right. We won, Reed. We actually won. We survived. That's not quite the same thing. Close enough for me. She turned to face him. What happens now? Now we build. The coalition, the ranch, everything we've been planning. He paused. And we figure out what we are to each other. I thought we already knew. The contract expires in 9 months. We need to decide if we're staying together because we have to or because we want to. Clara looked at this man, her fake husband who'd become her real partner, her business arrangement who'd become the person she couldn't imagine living without. I already know my answer, she said. Yeah? Yeah. Reed pulled her close, and they stood there on the porch, watching the night settle over their land, their empire, their future. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Not because a contract said so, but because they'd chosen each other again and again until the choice became as natural as breathing. The euphoria of winning lasted exactly 3 days. On Monday morning, Clara was going over the cooperative's first quarterly projections when Davies knocked on the study door. His face had the look of a man delivering bad news. Ma'am, we've got a problem with the water rights. Clara looked up from the ledgers. What kind of problem? Hartley's diverted the Eastern Creek, built a dam on his property, redirecting flow away from our pastures and the Brennan spread. Davies twisted his hat in his hands. Legal, technically, since it's his land, but it cuts off water to about 4,000 acres. How long until that becomes critical? We've got reserves for maybe 2 weeks. After that, we'll have to move cattle or watch them die of thirst. Clara's stomach dropped. Hartley hadn't accepted defeat. He'd just changed tactics. Instead of destroying them in court, he'd destroy them with geography and property rights. Reed appeared in the doorway, already dressed for riding. He'd heard. How bad? Bad enough. He's cutting off the lifeline to 3 ranches in the coalition. Clara stood, her mind already racing through options. Can we dig wells? Not fast enough, Reed said, and the water table's too deep in that area anyway. We'd need weeks and equipment we don't have. Then we need to either negotiate with Hartley or find another source. Hartley won't negotiate. He's making a point. Reed's jaw tightened. He's showing everyone that even if we won in court, he still controls the territory. 1 dam, and he's crippled us. Davies cleared his throat. There might be another option, the northern route through Widow's Pass. There's a stream that runs year-round, feeds into the valley. If we could get permission to run cattle through there, that's Morrison territory, Reed interrupted. Samuel Morrison. He's 80 years old and hasn't let anyone cross his land in 40 years. Then we convince him, Claire said. What's our alternative? Watch the coalition collapse because Hartley cut off our water? Reed looked at her for a long moment. Samuel doesn't like outsiders. Doesn't trust change. Barely trusts me, and he knew my father. Then it's a good thing I'm charming. Clara grabbed her coat. Let's go talk to him. The Morrison Ranch was smaller than Clara expected, tucked into the mountains north of Callahan land. The house was old timber, weathered but solid with smoke rising from the chimney despite the warm day. Samuel Morrison met them on the porch, shotgun resting in the crook of his arm. Not pointing at them, but not exactly friendly either. Callahan, he said by way of greeting. Figured you'd show up eventually. Samuel, Reed dismounted, helped Clara down. You heard about the dam. Heard Hartley's squeezing you. Also heard you won in court. Seems like you've had better days and worse. The old man's eyes shifted to Clara. This the wife who climbed into canyons and built cooperatives? This is Clara, Reed said. Samuel studied her with the kind of attention that missed nothing. You don't look like much. But then, my wife didn't either when I married her, and she turned out to be tougher than boot leather. Come inside. I don't conduct business on porches. The house was spare but clean, with furniture that had been built to last generations. Samuel poured coffee that could strip paint and gestured for them to sit. I know why you're here, he said. You want passage through Widow's Pass, access to the northern stream. Yes, Clara said. We're willing to pay. Samuel held up a hand. I don't want your money. Got more than I need and nobody to spend it on. My son died in the war, my daughter moved to San Francisco, and my wife's been gone 10 years. He took a sip of coffee. So money doesn't interest me. Then what does? Reed asked. Honesty. Legacy. Knowing that when I die, this land goes to someone who'll respect it. Samuel set down his cup. I've watched Hartley buy up half the territory, watched him crush good people. I've also watched you fight him, Reed, watched you try to be different than your father, who was a hard man but a fair one. He turned to Clara. And I've watched you build something that shouldn't work, getting stubborn ranchers to cooperate. That takes more than charm, takes understanding people. We need the water access, Clara said plainly. Not just for us, but for the whole coalition. If Hartley can choke us out this easily, everything we've built falls apart. I know. Samuel stood, walked to the window. I'll give you passage rights, but there's a condition. What condition? When I die, this ranch gets absorbed into your cooperative. Not sold, not passed to some distant cousin who'll flip it to Hartley. It becomes part of what you're building, managed collectively, profits shared. He looked back at them. I want to know it'll mean something after I'm gone. Clara glanced at Reed. This wasn't a small ask. It was essentially Samuel giving them his land, his legacy, trusting that they'd honor it. We can put it in writing, Reed said. Legal documents, witnessed, ironclad. Don't insult me with lawyers, boy. Your word is enough. Your father's word meant something. I'm betting yours does too. Samuel extended his hand. Deal? Reed shook it. Deal. Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind and decide I like my privacy more than I like you. They rode back in silence, both processing what had just happened. Samuel Morrison's land was maybe 3,000 acres of prime grazing territory. Adding it to the cooperative would strengthen their position considerably, but it also meant accepting responsibility for preserving his legacy. That's a lot of trust, Clara said finally. Yeah. Reed's expression was complicated. Samuel's betting everything that we won't become what we're fighting against. Will we? I don't know. Power changes people. Money changes people. We might have the best intentions now, but 5 years from now? 10? He shook his head. That's the risk he's taking. Clara understood what Reed wasn't saying. It was the risk they were all taking. The coalition could become exactly what it was meant to prevent. Another consolidation of power. Another way for the strong to dominate the weak. The only difference was that right now they believed they were the good guys. History was full of people who'd started with good intentions and ended as tyrants. Then we build in safeguards, Clara said. Rules that prevent any one person or ranch from controlling too much. Term limits on leadership positions, transparent accounting. We make it so even if we wanted to abuse the system, we couldn't. Reed looked at her. You really think that'll work? No, but I think it gives us a better chance than just hoping we stay noble. A smile tugged at his mouth. You know, when I first met you, you were this scared girl with nothing but a carpetbag. And now I'm a cynical strategist with trust issues. Progress. I was going to say you've become someone who sees the world clearly and still chooses to fight for it anyway. He reached over, took her hand. That's rare, Clara. She squeezed back, warmth spreading through her chest. We should tell the coalition about the water access. They'll need to coordinate moving cattle through Widow's Pass. Tomorrow. Tonight, I want to just... Reed paused, searching for words. I want one night where we're not fighting or planning or surviving. Just us. Clara understood. They'd been at war for so long, she'd almost forgotten what peace felt like. All right, she said. One night, just us. That evening, they had dinner alone. No Mrs. Callahan, no staff hovering, no business discussions. Just two people eating food that was probably too fancy and drinking wine from the cellar that Reed's father had been saving for special occasions. What do you think he'd say? Clara asked. Your father. About all of this. Reed considered. Probably that I'm an idiot for picking fights I can't win, and a bigger idiot for trusting people. He smiled. But he'd also say, I'm a Callahan, and Callahans don't back down. So he'd be proud and exasperated in equal measure. Your mother's come around. She actually smiled at me yesterday. That's just her face adjusting to not scowling. Give it time. Reed poured more wine. She told me she offered you a deal to take the fall and save me. She did. And you said no. Of course I said no. I'm not a martyr, Reed. I'm just someone who refuses to be destroyed quietly. Clara met his eyes. Besides, saving you would have meant losing you. That seemed like a bad trade. Reed reached across the table, took her hand. The contract expires in 8 months. I know. We should probably talk about that. Probably. Clara's heart was beating faster now. This was it. The conversation they'd been avoiding. The one that would define what came next. Reed stood, pulled her to her feet, and led her to the window overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and shadow. When I first made that contract, he said, I thought I was buying a solution to a problem. A year of pretending, and then we'd both move on with our lives. And now? Now I can't imagine this place without you. Can't imagine making decisions without arguing with you first. Can't imagine... He stopped, turned to face her fully. I don't want this to end, Clara. The contract, the arrangement, whatever we're calling it. I want you to stay. Not because of an agreement or money or necessity, because you choose to. Clara's throat tightened. She'd been a lot of things in her life. Desperate, scared, angry, determined. But she'd never been chosen before. Never been wanted for who she was, rather than what she could provide. The girl who walked through your door 5 months ago, she said slowly, she doesn't exist anymore. I'm not that person. I know. I'm harder now, less trusting. I've lied and schemed and become someone I'm not sure I recognize. I know that too. And you still want me to stay? Reed's smile was soft. I don't want the girl who walked through my door. I want the woman standing in front of me, the one who rappels into canyons and builds coalitions and refuses to be destroyed. I want the person who saw through my desperation and chose to fight beside me anyway. Clara felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back. I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable or trusting that good things won't get taken away. Me neither. We'll figure it out together. Reed, marry me, he said, for real this time. No contracts, no lies, no exit clauses. Just two people who choose each other every day, even when it's hard. Clara laughed, the sound watery. We're already married. We're legally married. I'm talking about something real, something that means more than a piece of paper. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple gold, worn smooth. This was my mother's. She gave it to me this morning, said I should have given it to you months ago. Your mother gave you her ring? For me? She said you've earned it, said you're more of a Callahan than half the people born with the name. Reed held it out. So what do you say? Will you marry me again, Clara Vance? For real this time? Clara looked at the ring, at this man who'd saved her and challenged her and become her partner in every way that mattered. She thought about the factory girl who'd come west looking for honest work, who'd found something far more complicated and infinitely more valuable. She thought about all the ways she'd changed, all the ways she'd grown, how she'd learned to fight and strategize and build something meaningful from the wreckage of desperation. And she thought about what came next, the battles still to fight, the coalition to nurture, the empire to build together. Yes, she said, on one condition. What? We redo the contract, equal partnership, everything in writing. I'm not just your wife, Reed. I'm your business partner, your co-strategist, your equal in every way that counts. Reed grinned. Deal. He slipped the ring on her finger, and Clara realized it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Wyoming, Clara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The wedding, the real one, happened 3 months later, after the cooperative had stabilized and Hartley had finally accepted that his monopoly was broken. It was small, intimate, nothing like the society spectacle Mrs. Callahan probably wanted. Just the coalition ranchers, some of the staff, and a handful of people who'd become family through choice rather than blood. Jacob Brennan stood up as witness, his wife Ruth beside him. Samuel Morrison came down from the mountains for the first time in years, complaining about his knees the whole way. Even Davies cleaned up nice, standing in the back with a smile on his weathered face. Mrs. Callahan cried, which shocked everyone, including herself. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate vows, no religious officiant, just a county justice who declared them married under the law and their own words to each other. Reed went first. Clara, I promise to never stop fighting beside you, to trust your judgment, even when it scares me, To build something with you that's bigger than either of us alone. Clara's turn. Reed, I promise to never stop challenging you. To be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. To choose you every day, even when choosing is hard. They exchanged rings. New ones this time, purchased together, symbols of something built rather than borrowed. When the justice pronounced them married, the room erupted in applause, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt since her father died. She felt like she belonged. The celebration afterward was raucous and joyful, with music and dancing and food that the coalition families had brought, everyone contributing something, making it theirs. Clara danced with Reed, with Davies, with Samuel Morrison, who complained the whole time about his knees, but kept dancing anyway. Around midnight, she slipped outside for air, standing in the garden where she'd first realized she was changing into someone new. Mrs. Callahan found her there. Hiding? The older woman asked. Breathing. Mrs. Callahan stood beside her, both of them looking up at the stars. I owe you an apology. Clara turned, surprised. For what? For underestimating you. For seeing you as a threat instead of what my son needed. Mrs. Callahan's voice was softer than Clara had ever heard it. You've given him something I couldn't. A reason to build instead of just defend. You've changed this ranch, this family, in ways I didn't think were possible. I didn't do it alone. No. But you did it when no one believed you could. That takes a particular kind of courage. Mrs. Callahan pulled something from her pocket, a small leather journal. I want you to have this. It was James's, Reed's father. He kept notes about the ranch, about his dreams for what it could become. Most of it never happened because he was too busy fighting wars. Clara took the journal carefully. Why give it to me? Because you're actually doing what he only dreamed about, building alliances, creating something sustainable, thinking beyond the next crisis. She paused. And because you're family now. Really family, not just legally. Clara felt her throat tighten. She'd spent so long without family, without belonging, that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be claimed by someone. Thank you, she managed. Mrs. Callahan squeezed her shoulder, a brief, awkward gesture that meant more than words. Then she walked back inside, leaving Clara alone with the journal and the stars. Clara opened it, saw James Callahan's handwriting covering the first page. A quote, underlined twice. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build with the people beside you. She closed the journal and looked out over the valley, the land that had become hers, the empire they were building together, the future that was finally, impossibly within reach. Reed appeared beside her. Found you. I wasn't hiding. Just breathing? Something like that. Clara leaned into him. Your mother gave me your father's journal. Yeah? What's it say? That legacy is what you build with people, not what you leave behind. She looked up at him. I think we're building a good legacy, Reed. We're trying. That's all anyone can do. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. 6 months later, the coalition had grown to 23 ranches. They'd successfully negotiated better shipping rates, established shared grazing rights, and even started a cooperative store where members could buy supplies at bulk prices. Hartley still owned the most land in the territory, but his stranglehold was broken. He couldn't squeeze out ranchers who had each other's backs. Clara managed most of the day-to-day operations now, her factory girl past transformed into something useful. She understood numbers, logistics, the practical mechanics of keeping an alliance together. Reed handled the big picture, long-term strategy, political relationships, the public face of the Callahan Empire. Together, they were formidable. The biggest test came when Hartley made one final move. He tried to buy out the railroad, control the shipping routes that the coalition depended on. It would have crippled them economically, forced them to either pay his prices or watch their cattle rot. Clara spent 3 weeks in railroad offices, negotiating, arguing, making deals with executives who'd never taken a woman seriously before. She brought numbers, projections, proof that the coalition represented more stable, reliable business than Hartley's boom and bust operations. In the end, the railroad chose the coalition. Hartley showed up at the ranch the day after the announcement, his carriage pulling up in front of the house like he owned the place. Clara met him on the porch. You've won, he said without preamble. For now. We didn't win. We just stopped letting you control everything. Clara crossed her arms. There's a difference. Is there? Hartley studied her. You know, when Vanessa first told me about you, I thought you were nothing. A nobody trying to climb above her station. I was wrong. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. You're dangerous, Mrs. Callahan. You've built something that threatens the natural order of things. Someday, you'll learn that empires built on idealism don't survive. They get crushed by people willing to do what it takes to win. Maybe. Or maybe the world's changing and you just can't see it yet. Clara leaned against the porch rail. Your empire is built on fear and control. Ours is built on people choosing to work together. I'll take my chances with ours. Hartley's smile was cold. We'll see. In 10 years, when your coalition has collapsed under its own idealism, when the ranchers are fighting over scraps and tearing each other apart, remember this conversation. And when it hasn't collapsed, when it's grown stronger and changed how business works in this territory, you remember it too. Hartley tipped his hat. Mrs. Callahan, it's been educational. Mr. Hartley, don't come back. He left, and Clara watched his carriage disappear down the road. She knew it wasn't really over. Men like Hartley didn't surrender. They just changed tactics. But for now, they'd won the battle that mattered. Reed appeared beside her. Eavesdropping? Absolutely. You handled that well. I've had good teachers. Clara turned to face him. He's right about one thing. What we've built, it's fragile. It could fall apart if we're not careful. Probably will fall apart at some point. Something this new usually does. Reed pulled her close. But then someone will rebuild it better. That's how progress works. Messy, 2 steps forward and 1 back, but moving anyway. Clara thought about that. About the factory girl who'd walked into a ballroom and become something she'd never imagined. About the lies that had become truth, the desperation that had become strength, the survival that had become purpose. I don't regret it, she said. Any of it, even the hard parts. Good, because it's not getting easier. Reed kissed her forehead. Davy says we've got 4 more ranchers asking to join the coalition. Samuel Morrison's nephew from Montana wants to start something similar up there. And your mother? My mother? Clara pulled back. What about her? Reed smiled. She wrote. The letter came this morning. Clara's heart stopped. She hadn't heard from her mother in 10 years, hadn't known if the woman was alive or dead. They'd parted badly, her mother choosing a new husband over her own daughter, sending Clara away to make room for a new family. What did she say? She read about you in a newspaper, about the coalition, the court case, everything. She wants to meet, to reconnect. Reed handed her the letter. It's up to you, no pressure either way. Clara took the letter but didn't open it. She thought about the girl she'd been, desperate for any scrap of family, willing to accept crumbs of affection, and she thought about who she was now, someone who didn't need to accept crumbs from anyone. I'll think about it, she said. But Reed, whatever I decide, I'm not doing it alone. We're partners. That means you're part of this too. Always. They walked back inside together, past the drawing room where Mrs. Callahan was reviewing accounts, past the study where coalition documents covered every surface, into the life they'd built from lies and desperation and impossible choices. And Clara realized something that made her smile. She'd come to Wyoming with nothing, looking for honest work and a fresh start. Instead, she'd found something infinitely more valuable, a purpose, a partner, a place where she mattered. The girl who'd walked through those doors was gone, replaced by someone stronger and harder and infinitely more capable. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the biggest lies could lead to the most honest lives, that desperation could transform into determination, that the person you became while pretending could turn out to be more real than the person you'd been before. Clara Callahan, not Vance anymore, not really, stood at the window and looked out over the empire they'd built, the ranch that was theirs, the coalition that was growing, the future that was finally, impossibly, secure. Reed came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking? That I started out trying to survive, but somewhere along the way I learned to live. That's a hell of an accomplishment. We both accomplished it. She turned in his arms. I couldn't have done this alone. You could have. You're the strongest person I know. Reed smiled. But I'm glad you didn't have to. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the valley in gold and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, cattle were lowing, ranch hands were finishing their work, and the land that had seemed so foreign 5 months ago had become home. Clara had learned something important in her transformation from desperate factory girl to cattle baroness. Identity wasn't something fixed and permanent. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, until the person you pretended to be became the person you actually were. She'd pretended to be Reed's wife and learned to love him for real. Pretended to be a rancher and learned to build an empire. Pretended to be strong and discovered actual strength growing beneath the performance. The lies had become truth through sheer force of will and repetition. And maybe that was the real lesson, that sometimes you had to fake something long enough to make it real. That courage wasn't being unafraid, it was being terrified and choosing to act anyway. That the boldest lies could indeed lead to the most honest lives, as long as you were willing to do the work of making them true. Clara Callahan had learned to fight, to strategize, to build something meaningful from nothing. She'd learned that power wasn't something you were born with. It was something you claimed, one impossible choice at a time. And she'd learned that home wasn't a place you found. It was something you built with the people who chose to stand beside you. Reed held her as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and Clara felt the last piece of her old self finally let go. She wasn't the girl from Philadelphia anymore. Wasn't the desperate woman who'd walked into a ballroom and accidentally changed her entire life. She was Clara Callahan, cattle baroness, coalition builder, equal partner in an empire that was still growing. And she was exactly who she was supposed to be. The stars came out one by one over the Wyoming frontier, and Clara stood in her home, really her home now, and understood what it meant to have transformed completely. From lies to truth, from survival to purpose, from nobody to someone who mattered. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean or simple or anything like what she'd imagined, but it had been hers. And that, Clara thought as Reed kissed her temple and pulled her closer, was worth more than any honest seamstress work could ever have been. Sometimes the wrong door was exactly the right one after all.